Look, we're live. There's no
Hey,
video.
everybody.
That's it.
Look at that.
It's just us. And today is going to be crazy because we have not one, but two topics, Mark. You
Oh,
didn't, you
what's our
didn't,
second topic?
well, I almost made this the topic, but I figured we'd have two topics. I want to talk about the 2024 Dungeon Master Guide DMG cover came out.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I liked it.
Well, I'm going to break it down into detail and tell you what, and see what it means because I think there's more to it than people think, and it's
Nice.
fascinating. Um, and then we're going to talk about this. We said this last week as almost a throwaway topic, but I couldn't think of anything else to talk about, so I was like, actually, it's probably a good topic. And it's quiet right now, so we'll go through what we do every day to make role-playing games and books and TTRPGs. We'll go through a day in our lives because I don't even know what Mark does. I'll be honest. So
It's just a black box, and just suddenly, like, large amounts of different kinds of things that you need from me just appear in your inbox, and you're like, whoa,
pretty
I don't
much.
know if he wrote that, but it's done.
Hold on, I got a call. So actually, I might have to leave for a few minutes because people remember my dog had knee surgery. She like tore her ACL. They don't have ACLs; they have something else, and she finally is okay. And now her other leg is limping, and I'm like, oh,
Oh, no. Was it, like, compensatory for
yes,
the first
yes,
leg?
yes,
Or Zoe? That's Zoe who had that, right?
yes. And I'm like, I'm angry on a lot of reasons, but I'm like, I've been spending months going through this rehab, and it's just, I mean, I feel bad for her, and it's just like, oh, it's very common for that to happen because she was standing on one leg for so long. So I might have to go because this just happened like an hour ago. Um,
Well,
but
that is a thing that could happen behind the scenes at an RPG company. At any time, you could be like relying on something, and then somebody's dog is hurt or anything like that. And if you don't have a workflow process in place that efficiently pipelines your projects and make sure you know where you could move and do things on multiple projects in case one of the rate limiting steps gets delayed, you're guaranteed to get into like a kind of traffic jam where the one delay, like for instance, this example that Steven gave here, can delay multiple projects. But if you do smart project management, then you can avoid that because you can pivot off onto something else and wind up not really losing any time if you are able to like wisely reassign resources.
yeah, I mean, we don't even have workflow, do we? I don't even know. I mean, you and we're going to go through how we work, and then I'm going to say from the beginning, don't work the way we work because we're insane. And you are probably one of the few people in the world who can work the way I work, which probably.
I
'Cause-
agree with that. And I've even heard from other people who are just like, Mark, how do you even do the workflow that Steven does? That doesn't even make sense that anyone can successfully do that. And I'm like, I handle it. I'd rather the workflow be less chaotic, but I can handle with your workflow, and I'm very adaptable to that, and it works fine.
It works fine. And I'm going to explain that. I've been doing this for 20 years for my other job. And it's not, I've seen it all and I've done it all. And you can either be agile and chaotic, or you could be orderly, but it's kind of slow. And we don't have the luxury of being orderly and slow. So we have to be agile and chaotic. So
I prefer to be agile and with a relative order, but
we
flexibly
have
able to
order,
change
though.
it.
We have order. We
But
have a
we
plan.
don't always achieve that goal. But I'll
Oh,
be able to
God, no.
tell people
Uh-huh.
when we say this is what Steven does, and then Steven says that don't do it that way. I'll be able to give you some examples here from my other experience working with multiple tabletop RPG companies of
True.
some ways you could do it that are not the way that Steven says not to do, so that you know what other ways to do it too.
Yeah, don't do it our way. We are unique in our situation. We'll leave it at that. So I actually have slideshows. I got pictures. Should we go into?
Oh,
You know what?
nice.
Let's do the mini topics and then we'll go into the because I'm going to talk about this for a while. So the first mini topic, real quick, is that they've been talking a lot about this, like the new books are coming out, the DMG, the Player's Handbook, but there was a big preview of the making of the original Dungeons and Dragons 1970 and 1977 book. And of all the books, that's the one I'm the most excited about. That's the one I want to see. Here, I'm putting a link in chat. And people are like, oh, well, this is already in some other books. Yeah, but not really. Like, there's a lot of pictures in here from actual letters and notes from the 70s and the early 70s of, the people who made D&D, and it looks great. I mean, it's a $100 book. It's something like 600 pages long. And what's really important is that I didn't go to it, but there was this convention called DaveCon recently, and Professor DM and Baron DeRop and a couple other people went. And they had all the original, people, all the other people, like the person who created Blackmore, and the person who created Dungeon, the board game, and so forth. And these people are all in their 70s and 80s, and it's like, I don't know how much time they have left, so you really got to preserve this information before it's lost forever. And I am very happy they're doing this book, because you can actually see the letters from Gary Gygax to Dave Arneson. Like, and it's so funny, he wrote on on 3x5 cards. And then he typed on 3x5 cards, which is really funny, because when I was a kid, I used to live on 3x5 cards. Now I live on Post-it notes. My desk is covered in Post-it notes. But when I was a kid, I used to have a stack of 3x5 cards, and I would just write everything down on 3x5 cards and keep them around my desk. So maybe that's a thing. Do you use anything like that? Do you use
I don't tend to use index cards, but one thing that I remember about this making of D&D that makes me think that it could be really good is that they have good people working on it. I heard that the historian John Peterson was good. I know for a fact that Jason Tondro, who seems to be the lead on the WotC side and used to be at Paizo, he was a literature professor, and he really knows his stuff in terms of the academia of fantasy and gaming. So I would have pretty good confidence in the way that he would put things together.
Okay. Yeah, no, they have excellent people working on this, and true historians. So, and it comes out soon. It comes out in less than a month. It comes out actually right around Origins. June. Whoops, I lost the page. Sorry. Ignore me. June 18th. I believe that's Origins. So cool. By the way, I will be at Origins, and I will be doing 2 panels. What they are, I have no idea, but I know I'm on them. So I'll be there, and I'll be easy to find, because it's not that big of a convention. So if you want to come over and say hi, and there you go. Anyhow, so that book is coming out, and I'm of all the books, that's the one I want to get, because I feel like, I don't know, every day another person is dying. It's like, and it feels like, the one that still gets me is Pee-wee Herman. I mean, can't believe Pee-wee Herman is dead. It's kind of stunning. I know he died of cancer out of nowhere, but it didn't seem that old, and it's just every day someone else is dying, and I just want to make sure people have this history down, because there was no computers back then. It was all written in hand notes, and the thing is, they kept a lot of notes and a lot of correspondence. So, and they need to be able to still talk to these people, the ones that are still alive. So the other thing that was big this week was PaizoCon was last weekend. Oh man, I liked it and I hated it, because I loved going to PaizoCon. I liked going to Seattle. I liked hanging out with everyone, playing with everyone, doing the banquet. It was great. And now it's all digital. I mean, I get it. It's the savings, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars, huge amounts of savings, versus renting a hotel and putting on this convention with everyone at Paizo versus virtual. And plus they're a virtual company, so I don't think they'll ever do it in person ever again. But I don't know, it's just not the same. I mean, we didn't even participate this year, which is weird because usually we participate every year. But they had a whole bunch of announcements. Let's see, a couple. One, they have a new versatile ancestry of the Dragon Blood ancestry, Mark.
Yeah, that got announced by accident when Amazon leaked it months ago.
But they talked about it
now,
more.
well, they were always holding off on doing a Dragonborn style thing out of like professional courtesy with Wizards back when the two companies were doing better with each other. But after the kind of backstab from the OGL, I'm not surprised they decided to shift off of that policy.
Yep. And they ended with a big announcement, the Pathfinder NPC Core, which I found out, I think that's one of the most popular books they ever put out.
You mean NPC Codex? That's completely wrong. If you mean the PF1 NPC Codex, you're definitely not correct.
Oh, I'm not correct that it was popular? I mean, it was
definitely not popular.
Oh, really? It's funny. It was popular.
I won't get into it any more than that.
Okay,
but I'll tell you it was definitely not popular, and even publicly said they specifically redid the format to Monster Codex to be completely different because NPC Codex did not was not one that people were into as much.
Well, then let me ask you a couple questions on that. First of all, I do know a lot of GMs who used it, so it could be it was very popular.
Oh, yeah, I had it.
Right,
I was not at Paizo at the time that it came out, but I can tell you why I think it was unpopular and why NPC Core will not fall into that problem.
Okay.
If you want.
Well, that's what I want to say.
Monster Core was incredibly popular, or not Monster Core, sorry, Monster Codex. It was very similar, but they revamped it so that each chapter had like goblins or orcs or something you really wanted, and then they had levels of different goblins and orcs that could be used together in encounters and fulfill different roles, and some options that were used to build them that players could also use, and some other related monsters like mounts and other things. That was great. It told a story. But NPC Codex, which, to be clear, NPC Core is probably not going to do the same thing. They've learned from this. NPC Codex was just like, we'll just do from 1 to 20 of every class of every core ancestry, and we'll alternate. Or no, I think it was just for every class, and they alternated every other level. One of them as like, this is kind of a standardish one that just basically does the job, and the other one that's like, this is completely goofy and off the wall. It might be just what you need, and maybe you don't need it. And the problem just was that, it was 1 to 20 of every class, not of every class and every ancestry and every class. The problem just was that, like, if you needed a gnome, because they often had like quite a few abilities that were related to their ancestry, and they weren't always easy to switch out. Back in PF1, especially if you PF2, you can switch very easily with ancestry. So if you needed a gnome paladin, it would be like, well, this is only, there's like, I picked that randomly, but right, it would be like the only one is level, say, 4. That's it. And let's say you were like, but I just need a human. That's pretty normal, right? And I need it to be in the level 10 range, and maybe at that range they didn't do a human for their normal one. They did maybe something else, and then they have 2 weirder ones that are just side to side with it, and you have to go 2 levels off of what you want to get it. So I just think that the core concept of just doing every class from 1 to 20 like that, while it appeals to like checking the boxes to the person who's making the book, it doesn't appeal usability wise in the same way. But NPC Core is probably not going to do that. I think they're going to learn from Monster Core.
It's the next book they're coming out with. So
yeah, no. I'm not saying they're not going to do an NPC Core. Obviously they are. Well, and that's a great idea. But they don't have to build it like NPC Codex, which was just like not a good formulation of an NPC book. That's what I'm saying.
What they would probably do if I was them is build it so that there are templates that you could apply any ancestry to.
That's what they did. Or I mean, that's what we did. That's what I did when creating the NPCs in some sort of the introduction to the NPC building is just like, these are presented as humans. Here's the adjustment you can put in real quick if you want to make them some other ancestry.
We did that even in Jewel the Indigo Isle.
100%.
Yeah, we had
and
that.
In Pathfinder 2, you can do that. In Pathfinder 1, you couldn't. And that's part of what made the Pathfinder 1 NPC Codex have issues.
There you go. Well, anyhow, I'm excited. I like to see, but you know what? I also like to see.
I'm very excited.
I like to see where different characters, they say here, thieves, villains, dwarves, elves, regular citizens living their lives, the list goes on. I like to see where they consider them in terms of the level. It's like, are they level 5? Are they level 7? Are they level 9? Like, I like to just see that, like, in their mind, what is considered what level, who is what. And it's fascinating. I thought it was a fun book. It's one of the few books I actually remember pretty well. I'm fascinated that it didn't sell well, because maybe it sold really well.
I didn't say that. I just said it wasn't popular.
Oh, got it.
Now, maybe that means that it didn't. Maybe it doesn't. But it wasn't a popular book overall, and its format was considered to be like not the best, which is why it was reformatted for later similar books.
So there was a lot more that was on there. They announced, let's see, Player Core 2. They have Catfolk, Hobgoblin, Colo, Kobold, Lizardfolk, Ratfolk, a lot of folk, Tango, and Tripkey, which are Frogfolk, might as well just call them. So we got all those. We also have the Damphir, Dragonblood, Duskwalker, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, I don't know about you, but for me, these are all the character classes that I like. You have Barbarian, Investigator, Sorcerer, Swashbuckler, Oracle, Monk, Champion, Alchemist. I really like those. I love the Sorcerer. The Monk is my favorite class, period. So, Barbarian is actually probably my second favorite class. So I'm very excited to see this one. Swashbuckler, you wrote, so I bet you're excited to see.
I wrote
the original.
I wrote a bunch of the classes.
Well, okay, Stephen, fine, Mister. Well, I actually wrote all the classes.
No, Stephen, I didn't write all the classes.
Just most of them.
It's not most. I believe it's still. I believe I wound up writing the most number of classes, just because of the fact that the design team rotated enough times, and I was on it for a while.
I will say
Logan's getting there though. If he writes one or two more, he's going to, but he hasn't recently for the last few playtests.
By the way, if you look at the cover for the Pathfinder NPC core, oh my god, like it has like 25 characters fighting up a staircase.
It looks cool.
That is what you call a very expensive cover.
Yeah,
that's like a $5,000
not going to
cover.
be cheap, but he's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's like a $5,000 cover easily.
Probably
very expensive, that cover. I was like, oof. I better hope that thing sells, because that cover is expensive.
I think it'll sell.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying. I saw that. I was like, ooh.
Speaking of covers, were you going to talk about the Dungeon Master Guide cover too?
Yes. So, by the way, like and subscribe. It's funny, we didn't get that many people. I guess if I almost made it. Maybe I should have made the topic. I was going to make the topic is what's up with the DM cover, and I thought that'd probably do better, but I thought people would be interested.
Know between those two. I think of those, if you had actually gotten together all the spreadsheet information on shipping and been like, what's going on with RPG shipping and or something like that. I think that I can do forever. Popular.
That has time. The cover I only have
the cover we should do today. I'm not saying we should have done that today. I'm just talking about in terms of when it's ready. I think that's going to be a popular topic.
Okay. Anyhow, here's the cover. I put it up for everyone to see.
Now, let's look at it.
Now, the cover is weird. Now, if you said to me...
I liked it.
Well, I didn't say it was bad. I didn't say it was good. I didn't say it was bad. I said it was weird. And I'm going to go through why. So, you said to me, Steve, what do you think is going to be in the DMG cover? And if I said, you know what? They're going to take popular characters and cartoon figures and action figures from the early 80s and put them on the cover of the DMG... Well, you would have won that bet, because I would have never guessed that in a trillion years. I was like, wow, that is not the direction I ever thought they would go.
Even based on the player's handbook?
Well, because the characters in the player's handbook, they're not on the cover. Okay? Those characters from the cartoon are a full page inside the book.
Yeah. But they gave the homage to it.
I know, but this is the cover. And so, for those who don't know, and we're going to go through, because this is, like, I saw Someone said, "Oh, Steve doesn't know the rules for D&D 5.0 as well, and he should let Mark talk." Was one of the comments, by the way.
Oh no, that was the person who said specifically. You misquoted them that you have not been keeping up with the 2024 update information. I remember that guy. He was like saying Steve knows a ton about almost everything, but the one thing he hasn't been doing is keeping up with that. And Mark has been keeping up with that more. That's what he was saying.
I've not been keeping up with it because it's the same thing like when there's beta release. I just don't care because it's all going to change. So I don't want to reserve any headspace for that. But when it comes to early 80s or 80s in general, you're talking to the master, man. This is all I know. That my entire brain is filled with nothing but 80s. And this is the cover of the 80s. So we're going to go into this, baby. There's a little bit of 2000s in there, too. So we'll get into that. So we got on the cover, you got in the center. You know who that is, right, Mark? You know that, right? With the one horn?
Looking at it from a distance right now. Let me, try to get a bigger thing.
You see that already? They're losing you. That's Venger, baby. Remember Venger?
I thought it was probably Venger from the D&D cartoon, but I've never actually seen the D&D cartoon because it was before my time.
Sacrilege.
I mean, I know of it. I know the names of the characters. I know what they generally look like, having been shown pictures of it, but I have not watched it as a cartoon.
So, Venger, which the D&D cartoon is super goofy. And Venger is kind of a doofus, okay? It's a cartoon kid show. So you're taking Venger, this goofy doofus of a villain, and you put him on the cover, and look at him, he's got one horn. He looks ridiculous. I looked at his cover, I was just like, what is going on? I was like, okay, I mean, he looks kind of badass, but he was always this weird, goofy Dorfus of a dude. And I was like,
and the helmet guy is Warduke, right?
Well, we're gonna get into it because check out, I got who those people are and where they came from. I'm gonna go through the whole history. Then the guy with the wings, and that guy has been around. I've seen him a million times. That's Warduke. Warduke is awesome, and he's very distinctive. 10 out of 10. Warduke. The guy's a villain. He was always evil. He's big, he's muscular, you know who he is right away. But then the woman is Skyla, who is an evil necromancer. So you have 3 evil people on there.
Oh, because it's the Dungeon Master's guy, right?
True. And who in the background, they said, and I know who it is, we're going to go through it, is a Dracolich.
That makes sense.
But I'm going to tell you which Dracolich it is, according to me.
Oh, is it one of the famous ones?
Oh, yeah, it's the famous. Not a famous, it's the famous. And I got pictures.
Wait, there's only one famous Dracolich?
Yeah. We're going to go through it. So here we go. So Venger is from the cartoon, and we're going to get back to Venger in a second. But then, if you go to book XL1, Quest for the Heartstone, which was a weird adventure. That adventure came out in the 80s, back when, we'll get into that, when He-Man and Transformers were a big thing. And they were coming out with action lines to support the toys. I remember watching He-Man as a kid, and my parents would come over and it's like, you're watching a commercial. And that's what they were. They were literally commercials, and they knew it. If you want to listen to it, there's a million podcasts, there's a million videos about this now, about the whole history of Transformers and He-Man. And He-Man made hundreds of millions. Back when 100 million was a lot of money. They were making hundreds of millions of dollars off of the toys and action figures. And then they did the cartoon to literally sell action figures. And it was considered an ad, so that's why they would always put in the little PSAs, like the G.I. Joe, always brush your teeth before you go to bed, and make sure you say please and thank you. They had to put that in, so it wasn't seen as a full commercial. The whole history of this entire product line / it was like edutainment, I believe it was called, because it was ads but entertainment, so they called it edutainment. It's crazy. Anyhow. There was a action figure line by TJL, I believe, of D&D figures, and here's what they look like. This is from the actual book, and there's Warduke, and there's Skella. She looks very different, by the way. And they were kind of selling in this adventure, you get to fight all these, quote, iconic villains, and by the way, go buy the action figures too while you're at it. It was a weird time. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Those of you who are my age will remember it was just kind of a weird time. So that's where they came from. Now, Warduke, you've probably seen Warduke because of all the action figures, his is coolest. I mean, like, his really stands out. And, you know, they had to put a female on the cover. It couldn't be just like 3 white guys. So they had to. I don't know how many they had to choose from, and they wanted someone evil, so they chose her. And they changed her up. They made her look a little different. That's cool. So that's where they came from. But let's get back to the cover. Do you know the history of Venger, Mark?
Isn't he just like one of the main villains,
Nope.
like the comic relief villain from the cartoon show?
It's so much
and
more.
there's something involving
It's
Tiamat.
so messed up. Okay, it turns out that the dungeon master brought these kids from our world to the DN to, you know, whatever Gary Gygax line, whatever you want to call it. And the very first thing they do when they get there is fight Tiamat, by the way. So let's bring children from Earth to fight Tiamat. And somehow they won, because, you know, the DM helped. And then Venger is always trying to find these kids and kill them. Well, it turns out the Venger was the dungeon master's son. And he turned evil because I guess he had issues with his dad. So what a weird concept is that you have the dungeon master brought kids to this other world to fight his son who's trying to kill these kids who the DM brought. I don't know what are they're going to have to retcon that because that is a weird, messed up background. I
mean, did they even have to explain it? They can just use the art.
they didn't, but that is the lore. That is the official lore for Venger, is that he was the son. All right, he wants the kids' magic weapons. That was the main thing. He wanted the kids and he wanted their weapons because they were like +5, you know, insane weapons and whatever. But there was a finale and it was written but never filmed. And you can find it where it like outlines everything. So again, weird choice to put Venger on the cover. It's just like whatever. It looks good. I mean, I like the pose. I like it. And then for the Draco Lich, well, let's get to the Draco Lich.
So yeah, I want to know, like, which one is the supposedly only one that it could be? Is it Shangri-La, the first Draco Lich who was destroyed in the Spellfire series?
No, it's oh, you mean Draco? What did you say?
The first Draco Lich to be created by the Cult of the Dragon, like in the timeline of like the Forgotten Realms campaign setting was Shangri-La.
Oh, okay.
I think something like that.
Well, I have it is that the first dragon ever created was, I thought, Drakotha. And Drakotha is the consort to Tiamat. And Drakotha was a male great worm red dragon Draco Lich, and supposedly the first one. And that is an Age of Worms, which is the greatest adventure ever written. And you fight, when you're level 21, Dragotha, who, by the way, is level 27 when you fight him. And he has a 2-page stat block. Okay,
I looked him up, and it doesn't say whether or not he's the original, but if he was, he could be the first one in Greyhawk, because
I think it's the first one in Greyhawk.
The one that I'm talking about is the first one from the Cult of the Dragons in Forgotten Realms, which is, I thought, where they came about. But it may be the first one in Greyhawk. He's certainly very important since he's a consort of Tiamat.
Yeah. So anyhow, you fight Dragotha and kill him if you can. Not only that, not only is he a CR-27, which is crazy, and he has like paralyzing gaze, like you're within 40 feet of him, and you have to do DC 44 fortitude save. Otherwise, you are if you fail, you're paralyzed for 2d6 rounds, and oof, that's bad. And
That's a lot of
basically
rounds.
you're dead. But if otherwise, you're immune from it forever, which is interesting. He's got all these permanent spells. He has persistent spells. He's got unholy toughness. He's got, let's see, 832 hit points. Even back
That's
then.
a lot.
I know, it's a lot. And he
It's
has
not enough to survive in Age of Worms because that was in 3.5. So
It was 3.5.
the PCs could probably do 832 hit damage in their sleep.
Oh yeah, the thing is, yeah, people were like, "Oh, we killed him in one blow," but still, if you weren't power leveling, going crazy. But the best part about him is they list out Dragotha's lair and the treasure you get.
Awesome.
That's
got to be epic.
Oh, I could go through some of it. I'll go through it's a page log, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but that alone is worth the price of admission. And it even says here, because it's at the very end, it says, blah, blah, blah. Basically, you get the treasure, but you have to go fight the main bad guy so quickly after fighting Dragotha, you don't have time to spend it. They actually say that in the adventure. I know. It's
there you go.
So it's 2.5 million copper pieces, 360,000 silver, 48,000 gold, 2,500 platinum, dozens of gemstones collected in goblets, silk pouches, coffers, swaths of velvet, and other containers worth a value of 48,000 gold pieces, and a single star sapphire the size of a fist worth 12,000. Miscellaneous pieces of jewelry, 62,000. 50 masterwork weapons worth 15,500. 20 masterwork suits of armor, 8,500. There's this entire long thing of a magic item, a large drinking horn with runes on it that gives you allows you to be. It's the horn from one of the sons of the barbarian god Voltan, and it's like crazy. All these
Sounds good.
magical violins, 7 paintings of a master, this amazing super rare book that's worth 6,000 gold pieces. But then of course you get a +5 ghost touch chain shirt, adamantium +3 fire resistant breastplate. Let's see, sunblade, rapier of puncturing, ring of air elemental command, ring of wizardry type. Is that 6 or 4? Greater meta magic rod of maximize. That alone is ridiculous. Bracers of armor.
That's honestly worth as much as any 5 of the other things you named.
Right? A greater meta magic rod of maximize. Forget it. But here's the next best one, being the monk. Bracers of armor +6.
I mean, that's Bracers of Armor +6 is fine. They're good. I think that's 36,000. But a greater maximized meta magic rod is 60,750 gold.
Well, did it go up to +6? I thought it only
went
up
to +8.
Oh, it goes up to +8.
And those are 64k. I'm pretty sure.
Got it. I thought it only went to +5. Or
no, I just checked. It's 36. So the greater meta magic rod of maximize, which is worth actually 121,000.
Yeah. Oh no, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's worth more than all of those coins you named, those millions of copper combined.
Mm-hmm. Well, that alone, it's because then it's a greater maximize. It's like, oh, I cast the 10th level fireball maximize. It's like, all right, well, you're dead. It's like you're pretty much all dead, or disintegrate, or anything. It's ridiculous.
So Horde notwithstanding, going back to the art, I like it. I think that the composition with Venger and Warduke and can't remember what you said the other lady's name was. I don't remember where she's from. Plus Dragotha slumbering on the back and that army of skeletons. I feel like
in the back. Do you know who that is? If you look on the back.
I thought you said it was Dragotha.
Oh, behind is in the Dragotha, right? Slumbering.
Wait, I see Dragotha slumbering there on the back.
The back cover. The back cover, you can actually see there in the Underdark, and that's like a mind flare holding up like a brain. If you look on the back cover, which is kind of.
Oh yeah, cool. I see a mind flare as well, but I assume. Wait, where is Dragotha then? Oh, I see. He's behind Venger. Yes. He's just blocked by all those things.
Right. It's just
I assumed he was sleeping down there in the Underdark.
No.
When the mind flare was kind of behind it. Okay, I see him now.
Yeah.
I would say the ability to see Dragotha on the cover, at least at the size where I'm looking at it now, is not the greatest. However, I still really like it. I think it really depicts what it means to me to be a dungeon master, showing like these different villains that as well as like army of undead, like and I think that it's well done. So I like the cover.
I like it. I like it. I mean, I don't love this dream. Like, they're doing this with all the covers. They're doing this sort of like watercolor dream-like look.
I think it worked better in this one. It didn't feel as blurry to me.
Yeah.
The characters felt themselves at least felt a little crisper and a little less washed out. I'm not like an art expert, so I don't understand how to describe it exactly.
I know what you're
But
saying.
compared to the other one, this one felt more
What do you guys
defined,
think?
even though it does still have the dreamy background, the misty blue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. It's good. We haven't seen the special edition, but so one of the things they're doing, I believe, here is, I don't know if you also saw, is that they rebranded the dragons, or they rebranded the gold dragon, which I actually thought looked horrible, personally. And
What do you mean by rebranded the Gold Dragon?
oh, the gold dragon, look it up. They redid the design.
Oh, they redid the design on what the Gold Dragons look like.
Yes, and it's we call that a Frankenstein, where they take, well, we'll take a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, a little bit from column C, and make a new thing. And I was like, yeah, because it kind of looks like, an imperial dragon, because it's long and thin. But then
Which
they gave
gold
it,
dragons in D&D have always been a little bit. Look back at your AD&D gold dragon pictures. They've always kind of had that a little bit.
I know,
though.
but look at its wings. It's got like little flaps. They're not even wings. Like, how does it attack with those? Like, does it even have a wing attack? Like, either give it wings or don't give it wings. Don't go halfway. Like, you don't just sort of say, well, we're adding little flaps to the sides. I was like, okay. You don't really need those. And why didn't you just go full in with I don't like the design. It's extremely long. It's like way too long. It like looks like a sword, which they said, they're like, oh, it looks like a sword. You see, the wings are the hilt and the body is the sword. I was like, I guess, but just make it look like a dragon.
That's closer to some of the older art I've seen of them in some ways.
Well, my point is that they seem to be doing this thing where and whether it was on purpose or because of OGL, is that they're very consciously branding everything of theirs with their brands, whether it's their name. Oh yeah, no, that you sent me a picture. That I think is what the Gold Dragon looks like. I love that design. That's
I sent a picture
design.
of an AD&D gold dragon. It's very
but
long.
Look at the tail.
It's very got more of an imperial dragon kind of look.
Oh,
and if you look, it doesn't really have hugely visible wings.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think that one's an excellent design. This new one is just. Anyhow, my point is that they're doing this so that they can brand it and trademark it, and then say, okay, this is what our design looks like. This is what our characters are. You can't put these characters in your games, and it makes sense. Look, I get it. Look, I would do the same thing. We do that all the time. We have characters and iconics. It's branding. It's making, taking a generic topic and making it your own. Warhammer does this all the time. I just found it interesting that of all the things they did is like, let's go back literally 41 years 41 years and use characters from the early 80s to put on our covers, I guess.
I'm not surprised by that, because I think that they want to go back to that time and leverage the nostalgia of the brand all the way back there. I mean, it's an anniversary. It's an anniversary edition, sort of. It's not called the anniversary edition, but it's coming out slightly after the anniversary, and it's kind of an anniversary edition. So this is what I would have expected from that. Like, maybe not exactly these characters, but it doesn't surprise me as much as it did you, I guess.
It just of all the things, it was shocking to see Venger, because Venger is a total goofball. It's like having Donald Duck on your cover as the villain. I'm like, really? Like, that's the villain? It's like, this guy was This guy was a joke. I mean, he was considered he was a punchline in a kid's cartoon, and he's the villain. I was like, okay, I hope they have stats for him. I'd like to see what he can do now. I mean, he's a lich, by the way, so I guess. And they even gave him the one horn, so you know who he is. Whatever. I find it fascinating. I'll leave it at that. Neither good nor bad, just fascinating. How about that? Anyhow,
There you go. I think it was a good analysis. We broke down the different pieces of this one.
I think we're
How
done.
we get into running an RPG company,
Sure.
and give people a behind the scenes look
Sure.
on how to run and also how not to run an
Oh,
RPG
okay.
company.
I'll tell you how to do it. Don't do it. Okay, that's
No,
it.
but
We'll see you later.
that's seriously a better advice. It sounds flippant, but it's well-known truism in the RPG tabletop RPG industry of how do you get a small fortune in the tabletop RPG industry. Start by going in with a large fortune. And in a lot of cases, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, like Steven did when he just started it because he's done so many related things, you can run into issues. To give a topical example of something that is a recent sort of hotspot that's flared up in the Pathfinder 2 community, there was a Kickstarter that we've talked about on the show a little bit in the past, called Sinclair's Library, that funded 2 years ago. And they didn't know. They put out a video today that was 9 minutes long from their front person, Know Not Ones, who's been on the show before, that said that they assigned all the money that they got to various tasks, and they didn't leave a slush fund of additional money for when things ran out. And then they ran out. So they've been having people volunteer their work to finish it off, but since they can't afford to hire them full time, it slowed down. That's exactly the kind of thing that can happen with well-meaning and talented RPG creator, but that doesn't know the business aspects of it like Steven does, and then tries to go into it. On your first venture, you're likely to need to learn the ropes. So one thing also I would suggest is if you do it, start small. For them, starting with a $140,000 Kickstarter was kind of what made the lessons that they learned that are good lessons be more painful for them because it was on a bigger project.
Yeah. That's actually it's fascinating because I saw Nonak one came back yesterday, and he did a video on Pathfinder. For those who know, I mean, I'm friendly with Nonat. Nonat had a really rough year. I feel bad for the guy, and he decided to just take a break. Look, it happens to everyone. Everyone burns out. I get burned out. We do this every week, and Mark knows some weeks I'm not in the best mood, and he knows it. I'm okay once we start the show and I start talking, but everyone has real life, and you have good days, you have bad days. Mark always seems to be the same, by the way. Mark is a robot. That's not an opinion. That is fact. Mark is a robot. Mark always seems to be good and bad. He's even Steven. You're always the same.
I try to be kind of even tempered,
You are.
even keeled overall.
You
I
are.
definitely remember, because when people it was on my interview for Paizo of what do you do at the office when you get into a big fight with someone. They asked me, I was like, I honestly haven't had one like that, but if I did, I would use these techniques. And I think Eric Moda was in the interview. He's like, you really haven't? I was like, well, no. I was like, remember, I'm in academia, so there is some sniping in academia, but not always within your own research group, depending on how your group is structured. But I really haven't. And after working at Paizo for a long time, I can see why they asked that. Definitely at any company that has enough people, there's going to be tensions, there's going to be pressure, there's going to be timelines. But I always tried to keep pretty even keeled. I remember when another group member was just telling me, they were like, my temper got really hot there, and I would like to apologize. But also, Mark, I don't understand, why do you just never flare up at things like this? And I was like, I don't know. I try to keep an even keel.
Well, anyhow, when I found about this and I was talking to some people, and I said, and then they were saying, "Oh, did you see Reddit?" I was like, "No, I didn't see Reddit." And so people are really mad because nothing came of his Kickstarter. And I said, "Well, I bet you ran out of money because that happens all the time. It's like you get the money, you spend it, and then you forget. You basically need to save like $50,000 for printing, for distribution, for warehousing, for extras. Like, you just need it. So, and I bet you they didn't. I bet you they probably didn't save 20,000 or even 10 or 5 or 0, and that's what happens. And then suddenly they realize the book's done, and now they got to print it, and it's expensive, man. It's very expensive to print books. You got to warehouse them. That's expensive. I mean, it's a lot. So anyhow, let's go through what we do, and I don't even know how to organize this. First of all,
maybe we want to do like a start with an anatomy of the process, where I will just give what some of the phases are, and you can chime in with the portions of like the art and some of the business parts that you mostly do.
Okay.
Just going from start to finish of one book.
Wait, let's do this. First of all, if you have any questions, this is it, man. This is the time. And you do a super chat, I'll answer your question 100%. So if you have any questions about how and what we do, this is the time. And it doesn't have to be that you want to start an RPG company. It could be that you just want to do something for DM's Guild, or you just want to do something for fun. And itch.io. Like, a lot of people do stuff on itch.io, and we'll tell you how to do it.
Many of these steps are going to be the same no matter what you're doing. Yeah. Some of them will be different depending on your scope and exactly what you're making.
Well, Mark being a robot is turning into a meme, by the way.
There you go.
Mark 5. Oh, I like that. That's are you Mark 5? Version 5? What happened to versions 1 through 4? It's like Babylon 5.
I don't know.
They just disappeared. One blew up.
They might have just disappeared. I blame the Vorlons.
Did you watch Babylon 5? I loved Babylon 5. Oh, loved it. I saw GMS there was a convention near me every year. I saw him. He's brilliant. Read his biography. It is the most horrible thing you've ever read in your entire life. It's called Becoming Superman. You will cry. It is. Oh, that guy had such a horrible life. It's amazing he came out the way he is. Anyhow, side tangent. So, what do you do, Mark? Because it's easier to say what you do, because I do everything else. So let's go through what you do.
Okay, so let's start with a product.
Okay.
And just go through the pipeline. And at some points, I will intentionally ask you to tell me what's going on in some of your areas, and others, I just chime in when you're doing a thing.
Okay.
So at the beginning of any product for an RPG company, it's just kind of like what you would do if you were making content, which is you need an idea of what to do. You brainstorm an idea, sometimes together, sometimes you bounce it off the wall, sometimes somebody has just had it for 25 years, like how Steven had the name Battle Zoo and knew that there was going to be something like Eldamon that he wanted to make for decades, but he needed to find the right place to do it. But regardless of where that idea comes from, you need to generate an idea. Make sure you have a good idea for a product that you think is going to be successful enough that you'll be able to make whatever your target is, right? Because maybe your target, if you're just starting out, is just to break even, or at least not lose a bunch of money putting out the product. Whereas if you're keeping going on, you might want to try to make a little bit of extra so that you can kind of pay for your own work or other things like that. So once you have the idea for the product, the next stage is you need to outline that product, figure out what will be in the product, figure out how many pages roughly you're going to take on the product. And the answer may be roughly, or it may be exactly, depending on what you're doing. If it's a PDF, you probably don't care. If you are roll for combat, it's going to be somewhere in the middle of these two, but Paizo is on the other end, where it's just like, if it is not within the 16-page signature, it will not happen, because you're paying an extra some amount of money for the book to do it off signature.
That's not true anymore, by the way.
Is it? Well,
yeah.
I've never seen, even if so, I've never seen Paizo go off the 16-page signatures. Yeah. Whereas at Roll for Combat, you're always going to be, you're a little in between. You could go up the 16-page signatures, but you still want to pay attention to how many pages things are going to be.
Mm-hmm. So you can go up the signature, by the way, but you can't do. You can do it. You can usually do what you want to do is you want to do an 8 or a 4, but never a 12, because 12 is a nightmare. That's expensive.
Yeah, 12 is a big problem.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
And you don't really want to do 2 or 6.
Well, you can't
for similar reasons.
You can't. You could only. It has to be either has to be divisible by 16, or it has to be. You could do a 4-page signature now. You could do an 8-page signature. You could do a 12, which is really just a 4 and an 8 combined. That's why it's so expensive. So they recommend. My printer says basically they don't care if you do a 16 or 4 and 8. It's the same price. If you do a 12, if one of the signatures ends with 12 pages, that's expensive. So they're like, never do that, and I never do.
It's like twice as much or something like that.
Well, that's why we have extra pages in the back for the advertising. Those advertising pages are just to pad out so we get to the signature size. That's all. So now you know why they're there, and all books do it. All RPG books do it.
So people are asking, what is a signature? A signature is a number of pages in a product
I can show you
that is used by a printer as sort of one unit of the product.
I have one.
These signatures are made up of spreads. A spread is 2 pages, one of which will be on the left, one of which will be on the right. See, Stephen is open to an art spread that was entirely art. Now he's open to a different spread of Eldamon.
Yes.
This is a spread. It's the introduction spread that he just opened to. He closed it immediately, but it was open to the introduction.
Well, no, you see, that's a 16-page. See, page 16.
And this is the end of the first 16-page signature.
Right. So that's
what a signature is.
And a book is made up of signatures. See, this is all the signatures.
We'll have some number of signatures. They are discrete units. A book is not charged per page, but per signature. And that means you pay the same for 4 pages as you do for 16, and you pay more for 12 because you have to put the 4 and the 8 together. They can only do powers of 2.
So this is a signature. This is a signature, and you can see 32 pages. Page 32. So these are 16 pages. So when they print, they always print. They being the printers, they always print in these signatures, and then you can see this is how they know how to line them up. They print this little color here. So then how to line it up, and then they bind it and put it together. Ta-da.
So for that reason, you want to outline and have a pretty good sense of how many pages you're assigning to each thing. Then you should break it down into the number of words and art pieces that you expect. This is because the next stage is going to be assigning the words to freelance authors and the art pieces to freelance artists. So once you have the outline out and enough of a description in the outline such that it's very clear what you need to write for the authors and to draw for the artists, you can start assigning out to freelancers. Now, sometimes you'll do things in-house, especially if you're new and you're small and you're just yourself. You are likely to do the writing part in-house instead of hiring a freelance author. When Battlezoo was starting out, there were some freelance projects. And then once Stephen hired me, he had a pretty big spate that I just wrote in-house. And we've gone back to a good mix where I try to create the things that are like innovating a completely new thing. And then once that's been established, we can try to have freelancers iterate on those and iterate and come up with creative new ways to express them. And so however you decide to do it, you need to assign authors, which might be you, assign artists, which I guess might be you if you're an artist. Stephen and I certainly are not artists, and so
I'm an artist.
You're an artist? You draw things?
I used to, yeah. I started out as an
okay,
artist.
Stephen is an artist. It's one of his many things, but he's never assigned himself an art piece.
No. Well, I have. Who does the books design, baby?
No, there's a difference between
there's a complete difference between design and art. You're right.
Between design and being one of the drawing. No,
you're right. I've never done any of the art. You're right.
You have very solid design skills and are definitely in charge of the graphic design, which is a different element. Yeah. We'll get into that later on. But in terms of ordering the specific pieces of art, neither of us, I think, is an artist who draws those.
I'm not good enough anymore. I'm not good enough.
Okay.
No.
Past Stephen may
have
been able to do it.
You know who did the charts in Eldamon?
You did the charts.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Those were good charts. I like the charts.
I see. So there, I did an art piece, and those are art. So kind of.
Yep.
So people are asking how much you pay. So 25 cents a word.
Almost no RPG company pays that much. MCDM does.
That's about it.
Wizards pays much less than that. Paizo pays less than Wizards, and obviously, there's some amounts of pay that are just ridiculously low that still are out there in the industry. I personally suggest that if you are trying to write as a freelancer, that you should, unless you're like very new and you're just taking your first thing to get your feet in the water, try to accept no less than 10 cents a word. But even major publishers will pay less than that. This is for heavy rules design, by the way. If you're doing something that is like a quicker number of words, it might be a little bit lower than that. But if you're doing heavy rules design, I wouldn't suggest accepting less than that. And Roll for Combat, I've found, has a higher maximum than Paizo and is more akin to Wizards, although for certain really crunchy
It depends.
aspects, it can go even higher than that.
Yeah, we pay based on skill. I do it a little differently.
Based on the skill that's required for that particular thing.
Correct.
So if you need to demonstrate some ridiculous skills, it can go even higher than even the maximum wotc pays, especially because a per word rate is not always reflective of what kind of work has to be done. One good example of that is the monster part system that I wrote for Battle Zoo Bestiary. I had to re-engineer the entire math of the economy of the game. And the result of doing that was it was a small table that didn't have very many words in it. So sometimes you have to think carefully about how you're going to do pay. And so what Steven did for that is just the rate overall on the project was higher per word, knowing that there was going to be a small number of words that required dozens of hours of work.
Well, also keep in mind, it's I don't want to get into that because that's a whole other different topic. It's like I actually prefer to do flat rates, and I keep it within scope. So we'll say you get paid this amount and you have to produce this many words. And if you go over, that's on you, but you can't go under, and that's it. And so that's how I kind of structure my contracts. I don't want to get into that because we can do a whole topic on that. And to be honest, it's all over the place.
Someone asked if you did the art for Mall Rats.
It's actually Mall Maniacs, you mean?
Mall Maniacs, yeah,
yes,
right.
I did some of the art for Mall Maniacs.
There you go. That's Steven.
I have it right here. Oh, bring it out. Oh, Mall Maniacs. Da-da-da! Look at that.
There you go. Is that some of your art there?
No, that's not my art, but
okay.
There's some in
I
here.
like it. It's nice little
and you can tell how old this is. You want to see how old this is?
Is it 1980 something?
Yeah, well, I put it this way. When I made this and printed this, dot matrix printer. Look at that.
Wow. There you go.
But this doesn't give you an idea. This is how long. Look, I did this layout on an Apple II Plus. This is when I started to do layout. I'm not trying to boast, but I am saying, like, it's like, I love layout. I like to do it. It's like I love it and hate it because it's kind of time consuming, but it's also very relaxing. I started doing layout when I was a kid, and I just got into it, and it's just sort of my thing. It's like, so, and that's something else. I almost want to say that is that Mark and I were almost like, I just watched, I just watched, what's it? With the Liam Neeson movie. But then he's like, Mark and I have a very special set of skills. Leave it at that. And he and I know it. And that's kind of why I hired Mark, because I knew his skill set. I knew my skill set. I knew we'd work very well together. I knew he and I could do what each other can't do. And, we have some overlap, but we actually probably have more things that we don't overlap, which is fine. So I do what I do, and he does what he does, and between the two of us, everything gets done. And that's something else, is that, there's so many things you need to do and that's a big problem, is that you have to then hire a lot of people for it, and that's where it gets very expensive. And one of the advantages for us is that Mark and I do the work of 10 people. Like, seriously, I mean, we do so much, it's ridiculous how much we do. I know we joke about it, but well, what else do you do, Mark? And then I'll go through, because I literally do everything that Mark doesn't do, which is a lot.
So we're going to go through this process.
Right.
So typically, Steve and I work together for the brainstorming. Whoever has the first idea for something, like for instance, the dragons was mine, Aldemon would be Steven's initially. There's iteration. I particularly spend a significant amount of time doing concept ideas and bouncing them off Steven to see what he thinks about it, where I'd be like, hey, so we have your idea for this this monster thing, and here's what I'm thinking. In order to get certain things to work, what if they are kind of melding into stuff and then coming out kind of like Spren from Stormlight or Jin from Golden Sun and some of these other things, it seems like, yeah, I think that's a good way we can go. I really like Stormlight. Let's keep going with that angle. And then I'll come back with something else later on. Once we have the concept, I'll write the outline. I will then look for freelancers, and Stephen might have heard from some other freelancers too. I'll take a list of all the people who reached out to me and the people I reached out to before who worked for us before who don't have anything from us because we've finished their projects, and see who's available. Try to get some good folks for that. While at the same time, Stephen is looking for artists for the art that I've at this point usually written an art brief for Stephen that will indicate what art we need. It'll have a short description of what we're looking for, potentially a reference art piece. If there's something like reference that it has the holy symbol of Chira, who's our goddess of spring, and she winds up being on a decent number of redeeming characters because she's always like, oh, everybody can have a second chance. And so that Kantutha flower, I think, has been on like multiple times before. But once we have the freelancers working on the assignment, or I'll be writing it if it's something that's written in-house, we wait, and eventually that writing is done. Whether it's me doing it in-house, I'll just be jamming on the keyboard as much as I can, other than doing other tasks that come in from Stephen. When it's the freelancers, they're doing it on their end. Their deadline will come, and we get back the words, and we get back generally, we sometimes ask for either an expanded outline or a milestone, and I'll give some feedback on that. The art will come back with sketches. And Stephen, can you describe a little bit about your process? Because I think you had a really good one for how you asked them for on the art sketches and milestones.
So Mark and I will go through. We'll do an outline. If you Paizo does a full pagination, I do a pagination, but I do the pagination later. Pagination is literally you break out every page. You literally break out exactly what is going on every page. And Mark and I do that, but we're a little loosey-goosey because we have a pagination. I don't want to bring it up and show it, but we have one for the Dragon book. We're working in fairies right now, and I can read from it. I don't want to show it, but I can talk about it. Is we have, like, for example, we'll have, like, you know, table of contents. Mark is in it now. Table of contents is 2 pages. Foreword 2 pages. Chapter art 2 pages. Dragon lore 8 pages. Then chapter 2 art 2 pages. Then the ancestries. Then the lore, etc., etc. And we break it out. We do the spreads. We figure out, okay, because it always has to be an even number. Okay, that's the other thing, is that it's extremely hard to do 7 pages. You always have to do even numbers. If you do odd numbers, I won't get into that, but we always try to do even, no matter what, because you always want to start on the left side. The only time you do odd numbers is if you have a full page piece of art on the left side, and then you can start on the right side. I'll give you an example of that. I mean, we're getting into the weeds here for that, but I guess that's why you're here. Hold on.
Also, occasionally in a monster book, you can do a 3-page section and then a 1-page monster on the right side.
Monsters
of the page
you
that.
can do. Oh, monsters can go. That can go even odd, because that you have as many.
Yeah.
So like here, like so the Eldamon trainer, you know, we have a full page on one side and then stats on the other.
That's still considered to be a spread.
That's
because
spread.
It's a spread that includes the art.
Right, because in fact,
it's not like that left page was about the elemental avatar or something like that.
This actually, the text doesn't start till this page on the left. It doesn't start until an even page. So it.
And the reason why it's called a spread is you can spread it open and see those 2 pages simultaneously on a paper book. Obviously, if you're using a PDF reader, maybe not, unless you have it on like the spread mode. So we do a pagination, and the reason we do that is so that I figure out how much art to order. So I do, whoops, I just lost something. I do all the art, and how it works is that Mark and I will sit down. Now, sometimes it's very simple. And what I mean by very simple is that we'll do art for the dungeon, the bestiary. Bestiary is easy, because what do you need? Well, you need a picture for every monster. And by the way, that's why bestiaries are very expensive. So you get picture. Bestiaries are the most expensive per page because they always have a piece of art on just about every page, and nothing else you will do was going to have a piece of art on every page. Yeah. And if you're a new and you're trying to use a way to save money by like getting stock art or something like that, which is a smart way to not bankrupt yourself on the art, you can't for a bestiary most of the time because you created this new 3-legged monster with 5 tentacle horns, and there's not going to be a piece of stock art of that.
Yeah, you can't. By the way, I lost the. I do this all the time.
And keep in mind that this step where you order the art is by far going to be one of your most expensive steps.
It's
and it is very likely, if you're new, that this art is what is going to cause your first product to lose you money, potentially a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because the writing, if you're new, you could just like do probably. And most of the people listening to this are thinking, I'm going to write a book. Now, maybe you're listening to it because you're an artist and you can provide the art for just your time and labor. In which case, this does not apply to you. But if that does apply to you, which is most people, you can easily wind up going red because of the art. So keep that in mind.
Yes, and so for art, it's basically a full page for a character without. The most common is a full-size character, no background. It's
usually called a no body, no background.
No, really? I didn't even know that.
Or not no body. I mean a full body. It's usually called a full body,
no body, no background.
No body.
That's called a blank piece of paper, Mark.
No, I said no twice. It's usually called a full body, no background.
Right, yeah, that's correct. I do full body, no background. That's the most common. It can go anywhere from 100 to 150. Depends on the artist. Depends on the complexity. Like if you're doing a swarm. Stop putting in swarms. Those are the worst. Those are expensive, because
it can go beyond that as well for a full body. It depends on what you want. Did they have a little familiar? Are you asking it for it to be very detailed,
yeah,
etc.?
There's a lot. One trick you can do, which is what I do, is if you order 10 pieces of art at once, they'll give you a discount because everyone wins, and I do that for most of my artists. So
a lot of artists have to go around finding people, and part of that time they spend is getting the different clients. So if they can get you as a major client who has a lot of pieces of art, they save hours not having to go find a million other people, which they can spend in some cases drawing. And in fact, for many artists, it can sometimes be more exhausting to have to deal with like being that storefront that it is to draw. So depending on which creative juices and which energies they have, it might be better for them to do more art rather than have to go out there and find more. So it makes sense.
Finding artists is tricky. For how I started was I just opened up the Paizo book and went down the list of every artist in there and wrote them until I found a few that liked working with me and I liked working with them. Recently, it's become less of an issue. I get almost every other day another artist writes me asking if they can work with us. So now they find me, and I have probably 20-ish artists that I work with on a regular basis. Some of them I give art basically forever. The person who does the covers for most of our books, he almost works. He works for other people. He almost works exclusively for me.
What's his name? Let people know.
Amir,
his stuff is awesome.
Makhlouf.
Amir Makhlouf.
Makhlouf.
I didn't want to get it wrong.
Amir, he does almost all. He's one of my A+ artists. But the other thing is that you need to also know what your artists can do. And even this happened to me. It's that one of my artists, they're really good at characters, and then I gave them something mechanical, and it was fine. But I realized, oh yeah, he just can't do mechanicals, and that's fine. It just, you just got to remember. And I have a spreadsheet of every artist, the rates for full page, half page, splash art, which is like a headshot, or full body, no background. And then I also have notes on like what they're good at and what they like. The other thing I do, which artists find weird, is that I will give them usually a list if I don't know who they are. And I'll say, here's 10 pieces of art with a description, choose 2. Most times they say, can I get all of them? And I always say, no. Choose 2 that you think that you like and you want to do. And I do that on purpose because I'd rather them find and take pieces they're excited to do and they're interested in than just giving it to them. And after a while, if you work with artists long enough, what's in their style and what they like and what they don't like. So I go through that. I send them a very detailed I send them usually a detailed outline of exactly what I want. And then if it's a monster or something that's a background, I'll send them a background too. Not that they need it. The other thing I'll often send in there is very specific background and details such as what type of weapon they're holding, what type of armor they're wearing, what type of gear they have. Are they male? Are they female? Are they tall? Are they short? Are they fat? Are they thin? Are they missing an arm? Like, do they have part of their armor broken? Like, I'll go into real specific detail if needed. Sometimes I literally say one of the monsters we're doing right now for Battles of Mastery Elemental Storm is it's sort of it's like a daddy long legs. It's a 15-foot daddy long legs where its legs are made of electricity and its body is made of iron. I don't have too many references for that. So the best I can do is say, this is what a daddy long legs looks like. I also put in reference graphics. Kind of make it look like this, except make the middle as big ball of iron and the legs electricity. Go. And they got to figure it out. That's the other thing. It's when sometimes you have tons of references, sometimes you have no references. That's something else they'll ask you for is the artist will often ask you for references. You definitely want to give it to them if you can, because otherwise things can happen. Otherwise you go back and forth. So usually, especially with new artists, I'll have them do 3 sketches, at least 3, sometimes 4. They'll send very quick roughs and in different poses, and then I will go through and approve them. Once the sketch is approved, they'll do the next page, which is line art, which is they'll actually do the line art, do the details. They'll send that to me. That's important because that's pretty much the last time where you can make big changes, like if they're holding the wrong weapon or something, so you got to be careful with that. Then they do what's called base color, where they'll do the base color and they'll send that to me, and it's just like the basic colors without going into detail, and then they send the final piece. And that's it. And then so it usually goes through all those rounds. I don't always do all those rounds. Sometimes for some of my artists that I've been working with for a very long time, they will send me just the sketch and then the final. It's kind of rare. I don't do that. Like only for a few of my artists I do that with. Otherwise, that's how we do it. I get them. They have to be, I prefer them in Photoshop, layered. Something else that actually even I messed up last time is that they have to work in CMYK. So books are printed in CMYK, your monitor is RBG, and every so often you will have certain colors like bright greens or bright blues or specific reds that look great on your monitor, and they're literally impossible to print. They will not print and look anything like your monitor. And this only happens extremely rarely, but I always ask them to make sure they're working in CMYK, because I did have this happen a few times where they did this amazing like creature that was almost glowing this green, like this translucent green that looked incredible. And then when I turned it to CMYK, the green turned to like muck, because it literally, you can't print that green. It's impossible. So I was like, ugh, and I fixed it as much as I could. It never looks as good as the monitor version, the RBG version. So that's something else, is that you want people to work in CMYK and in layers whenever possible. Now, again, I know Photoshop really well, so I can go in and fool around with it. I'll often lighten it. Something else, things print about 20% darker than what they look like on the screen. So I'll often go in and lighten things. I'll literally lighten them 20%, even though it looks almost overlit. But then when it's printed, it comes out perfect. So you got to be very careful of that. I'll get into the printing process in a second.
Yeah, we'll get to the printing when we're at the part where we're ready to print. And there have been some questions about printing too, but I think getting that art in there, this is the right time that we were ordering art. So that was good to talk about it. Yeah. On the writing side, just like you sometimes have different authors or different artists give more or fewer steps, I will have different authors give me more or fewer steps in between the final submission and when I send it off. If my outline was incredibly detailed and I gave like every single beat that was in it already, and it was an incredibly veteran author, I might just ask for a milestone that's about half the stuff to look at and then the final. Whereas other times I might ask for an expanded outline where they expand the outline to tell me how they're using the words if I didn't already tell them how to use the words in a micro. For example, the 8-page lore sections in the dragon lore that we added to these dragon books recently, I asked for some of our newer authors to expand the outline for me so I could see how they were going to use the 8 pages, and I proved those, and then they gave me a milestone and I gave feedback on that, and then they gave me a final version. And so it's kind of parallel to what Stephen was doing with the art there, except sometimes I write it myself, which is different than the art, because we don't have a stage where Stephen does drawing since the Mall Maniac days.
Well, one thing I do want to mention about the art is, here's the other issue with art. If you're lucky, you can get 3 to 5 pieces from one artist per month. Okay, per month. So if you're doing a book that has, a lot of our books have 100, 200 pieces of art, 200 pieces of art, and you get 3 pieces of art a month, it's going to take you forever. And the answer is, yeah, that's why you need 20, 30 artists. That's why you need to work on this way, 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 way ahead of time, like months and months ahead of time. And also, I hate to say
this is why I mentioned getting the art early in the process. We're about to go through like 12 more steps.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. We
started looking for the art this early, and it's not all going to be done.
Yeah,
probably until like 10 more steps from now.
No, it's not done until from our books, we start at the very beginning, and then the book is literally at the printer, and I'm still waiting for like 2 more pieces.
Yeah,
always
that's
happens.
why you have to start at the beginning.
Yeah, no, it always happens for our books, because I'll get to why that happens later, because eventually you'll have to fill out spaces that you find later that you
figure out during copy fit, which we'll get to in a little bit.
But I want to say real quick, this is why people are losing their minds with AI art, because even I have to say, I'm not doing it, but it's extremely tempting, because I will sit here and I will have to get, I'll get 3 pieces from one person in 1 month, and I can do AI art, and I can get it to look pretty good in a few minutes, and it's like for nothing, and it's like, just saying, it is tempting. I'm not there. I'm not doing it. I'm not there yet. I'm not going to do it, but it's going to become more and more prevalent, especially.
I can see why people who are smaller and aren't like Roll for Combat and don't have that much backing and are just going into the red, being like, I just want to make a product. I can see why they are tempted to do that. Even though I want to support creators, I want to support the artists, I want to support the authors. I totally understand, based on just watching how much money it costs compared to how much a small creator will make, and seeing how it prices you out, while at the same time, if you don't have the art, you won't sell.
Yeah, and by the way,
I understand it, but I am just not for AI art, even though I sympathize with people who cannot afford the art, but it's got to be done by an artist, like by a creator.
Someone asked, by the way, how do you make, I keep seeing someone keeps asking, you can copyright AI art if you create it and you are the originator, and then you change it and modify it.
Like if it's done for the early stages, and then you have an artist use that to modify and make a final thing,
then you can.
That being said, that is not what we do in Roll for Combat. So I'm going to paint you the picture. The art has started to get ordered. It's going to take a while and come in slowly over time. But at some point, while the art still isn't all in yet, we get all the words and they come in. We've got the milestone, we got the final, or I wrote it myself. What do we do next? Well, typically when something is written in-house, if you have like additional staff members, you might have a development pass done in a round robin hand around. When I write things myself, typically we let it stand. When it's written by freelancers, I will do a very careful development pass going through. And like normally the freelancers we pick, especially the right rules content, really, really know what they're doing. They're heavily in the tabletop RPG space already. They're very skilled. But there's still always things where I tweak like certain wording to make it easier to understand and change the levels, make something like, oh, this could be lower level. It doesn't have to be that high level. Or oh, this thing could potentially be a little unbalanced. Make sure to get it exactly on the baseline so that it's a perfect match for the balance of your games. And when I am done with that development pass, which is like sort of a type of edit pass, it's not just copy editing, it's developmental edits that where you do make a lot of design decisions on the text. Once that is through, then we start multiple processes at the same time. First, we send it over to the 5e conversion team to convert from Pathfinder 2nd to 5th edition. You might not need to do this if you're only publishing in one edition or one game. At the same time, I also send it out to Steven to start laying it out, as well as to the proofreaders to do more of a copy edit or a looking through it pass. Now, at many other companies that are not Roll for Combat, these are not done simultaneously. Instead, you would have a edit pass like before the layout and a second one after the layout to make sure that the layout and copy fitting didn't introduce any additional errors. Paizo will do multiple rounds of different editors looking at it during each of those phases as well. By doing it simultaneously, however, at Roll for Combat, it does mean that you can introduce race conditions where you have to apply some of the edits later after the layout. It can be worth it due to the fact that it allows so many processes that are each done by a different person to all be happening at the same time and speed up your overall progress. I will be in communication at that point in time with all three of them. If 5e has any questions, I'll answer. When the conversion comes in, I do a full design and development pass on the 5e translation, make some adjustments to that. When the edits notes come back from the proofreader, I will look at them, decide which ones to apply and how. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, the proofreader is completely right. This is perfect. Sometimes it's like, they make a good point about the initial text being a little hard to understand, but their suggested change doesn't fix it entirely, so I'll do a third thing. Sometimes something else. And if Steven is doing something in layout, sometimes he has questions or other things that I need to take care of right away that might delay the entire layout. So those usually take precedence over anything else if they pop up. Once those are done, and especially once the layout is done, it's time for copy fitting. Now, copy fitting is a task that can take a lot of time. It depends on how good your layout person is, who might be you if you were doing everything. Steven does a really, really good job laying out and requires me to do less copy fitting by far than I normally would have needed to do at Paizo. But on the other hand, the Paizo, our team is fantastic and the layout looks great, but they also have like 50 other books that they're doing and not just yours. So they can't spend maybe as much time as Steven is able to try to copy fit some of it himself. And therefore the copy fit task falls more on like the person who knows the text. So the copy fit is where you add or subtract text to try to make things fit to the end of the pages and the columns and just really fit into the book. You might find out that you need more art pieces at that point in time because you've gone like a whole spread over and there's no art on the next spread. Before we get too deep into what happens next, Stephen, can you tell us a little more about the layout phase? Because that's one that you do.
Yes. So something that happens is that after Mark goes through the text, and I trust Mark, I go through it. And this is what I meant by multiple hats. Like,
yeah, that's part of the proofreading pass.
Right. Is that I have an extensive writing background and editing background, as does Mark. So both of us can do that. Both of us, I can do the art because I have I'm not trying to boast here, but it's just, this is why we do what we do, is that, I have a background in art and design and layout and writing. So we are able to do what usually you need a team to do or multiple people to do. And this is rare. So I will go through the text and edit it. I usually don't show it back to Mark, and once I edit it, unless it's a specific section that I have questions on, and in that case, he and I will communicate. By the way, we communicate every day through Discord, in case you're curious, and then I'll just copy and paste text areas, and I'll say, what did you mean by this? And he'll say, oops, and sometimes he'll say, that's a mistake, or, oh, let's make this more clear, and then he rewrites it, and then I'll put it in. So that often will happen. Is that you
have to do this at every step of the process too. It's absolutely true. Like, for instance, when Steven lays it out, he lays it out fast and accurately, but sometimes it introduces a copy paste because he sees the template and he pastes it and a copy paste line gets thrown in. And so I or a proofreader might find after that, be like, how did this even get in here? It
Yeah,
wasn't in the
it's a
original.
copy
Oh, it was
paste,
probably a copy paste.
Well,
And
because
we'll fix it there too.
I have a templated design, and
I knew it.
well, because I literally like, so every month when I do the Year of Monsters, sorry, Year of Legends, I literally will open up the previous month's Year of Legend, say save as. So the last month was what, Were Creatures. So I'll literally
Yep.
open up Were Creatures, save as Lamias, and then start replacing everything.
No need to reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah.
But I knew you did that because I've seen things from
'Cause
the
it
old
happens.
files that live into the
Yeah.
later files. It happens. It's normal.
happens.
We catch them,
I
and
catch 'em. Gotcha.
with Roll for
Mhm.
Combat, we can do something that Paizo doesn't because of our release timing, which I'll get into later, which allows us to fix it before it goes to the printer, which I really, really like.
So I go through and edit everything, and I do that within Word. Mark goes online. He does it in GDoc. I prefer Word, only because I have a lot of, we'll get into it, but I do use a lot of tools to assist for my editing. I do recommend to use, there are things like Grammarly and there's other AI tools, the grammar tools. Why I strongly recommend that you use them is A, you're a very small team, and B, will be blind to. And what I mean by that is it's very frequent that you'll put in a word like the word a or the by accident. You'll just do it. You won't even know you do it. Well, Grammarly finds that, and they'll always find it, and it always happens, and it'll be like, oh, you forgot a period here. And I'm like, holy crap, you're right. And you'll just miss it. I mean, it's very hard to find that stuff, but you forgot the word a here, and it always happens, especially because you have these books that are 50, 100,000 words. I guarantee you're not going to have every one of those words perfect. Okay. A couple of those words are going to be wrong, and you'll catch them, but why make it harder for yourself, especially if you are a small team? And yes, they will help rewriting stuff. I rarely use it for the rewrites, but I will use it if they said, the one thing it's good at, it'll say like, the topic in the sentence is not clear. Or like, what are you, like, that comes up a lot. And I'm like, you're right. And then I rewrite it so it's clear. Things like that. Commas, inconsistency in capitalization, things like that. So there's a couple of them out there. So I use those. They're online too, but I find them harder to use. So I use it in Word. I'll go through it. Once I go through it, then I open up and I use InDesign. It's pretty much just the industry standard. And people are like, InDesign. Yeah, I used Quark. I didn't use Quark in college. I used PageMaker, baby. I was a PageMaker baby. So I used PageMaker and then begrudgingly went to Quark Express because I had to. I still prefer PageMaker back then. We're talking about the 80s. Now I use InDesign. InDesign, one of the things about InDesign, and I can do a whole topic on this, you got to set up your InDesign so you have as many styles and templates as possible. I set up, Mark, you would love it if you saw it, because I set it up like a computer program. So everything is templated, everything is like structured. So that's why everything looks so good, and it looks the same, because I can just apply styles very quickly, and it just, it'll go through. I have all these special search terms. I can go through, I can turn straight quotes into curly quotes. I can find double spaces. I can find little mistakes like that. There's a lot of these pre-made filters that I have written as well. I'm like, now we're really getting into the weeds. So then how do we do layout? Because someone said that. They're like, how do you do layout? Well, this is all you need to do. Start laying out and do it for 40 years, and you'll get really good at it. I know it's horrible to say, but seriously, you just got to do it, man. It's hard to explain. Like, I don't know. It's like I think of myself as one of those people, like, you see the beans, where like you see a jar of jelly beans, and someone can sit there and guess how many jelly beans is in that jar. I'm that person, because I can see it and I can figure out, just looking. I can see the text and I can see the graphics, and I can figure out how it's going to fit on the page and how much space it'll take. And Mark knows, because I do these layouts. I could do a 100-page book in 2 days. I just know. But I've been doing it for so long. I've been doing it since I was a teenager, that you just get a feel for it. And this is like any other skill. It's a skill. And I'm very fast at it. I will basically lay out the text first. I'll put all the text on the page. And in each section. So if I have a 100-page book, I'll usually do 8, 10-page sections, wherever it's like makes sense. So if I have an 8-page spread that's just a race or ancestry, I'll just do that section first. And I'll make sure that section's done. And when I do that section, because you can't keep going unless you have each section has to be done, because it can mess up the layout of the book. And obviously, if you have an odd number of pages, it'll destroy the rest of your layout. So I'll say, okay, I've got 8 pages for this. I lay it out. I got 6 pages of text and 8 pieces of art, which is 1 per page. And I'm going to say, crap, because that's probably going to go to 9 pages. I know already. I'm like, that's too much art and not enough text. And then I go to Mark and say, Mark,
let's get it to 10 pages.
We got to make it
that's
10
part
pages.
Of the copy fit.
I need copy fit. And that's where copy fit will come in. But what will happen is that I also know, like, this piece of art will go. I tried to stagger the art. So if I have a 2-page spread and I got a piece of art on the left, then the next one will be on the right on the next page. I try not to do like left, because it looks weird if all the art's on one side. I'll do the same with the sidebars. I try to mix up the sidebars so they're back and forth, left and right. But I also try not to have what's called orphans or widows, which is like a word that just like is hanging off the very end of a page. I try to keep feats together and text together. But it's a puzzle. At that point, it's a puzzle. You're like, okay, I got this text. I got these pieces of art. I got 8 pages. Let's go. And you just got to make it fit. And there's really no science to it. The only science is that, there's certain areas you don't want to break up. You don't want to like break up the middle of a feat if you can prevent it. You don't want to break up a middle of a text block for something specific. You obviously can't break up charts, which, by the way, 5e layout is way harder than Pathfinder because 5e has all these charts. So
all these boxes, too.
Ugh, so many boxes. And that's the problem with 5e is that those pages with charts, there's not a lot of art on them because there's charts and you can't mix charts and art. And it just doesn't fit because the chart has to be square. So, I mean, now I can get into this. It's like a whole other topic. It's like super advanced.
It's
design.
Okay to break up a feed like between columns or maybe the end of the left page and the beginning of the right page. But if you break it up between a spread, that makes it very annoying to read it.
Well, no. If you break it up if you have it on left and the right, that's fine.
Yeah.
I try to never. It's hard to do. It's 99% of the time I do it, but very rarely it will happen where you have to actually have it on one page and then flip the page. And so
those are very annoying because how are you going to use your feet if you have to keep flipping the page?
Yeah, there's not much you can do. Every so often, you can't, and I just give up. And it's only so long you can spend. So that's basically how I do the layout. Is I do it in little pieces at a time, and then as I finish that, I'm like, okay, those 8 pages are done. Next 8 pages or next 10 pages or next 2 pages. Sometimes it's just 2 pages. But a lot of times it'll also just be 1 page. Like if I'm doing a monster, well, monster's 1 page. So I just got to fit it on the page. There you go.
So in terms of the book creation process, which we can go into like the marketing stuff and like Kickstarter after we finish the book creation thing, I think. We are making it towards the end. We've done layout and copy fit. We got back the 5e version.
Well, let me tell you what
we've done our pass on the 5e version and it had proofreaders.
Wait, let's just talk about copy fit real quick. So what copy fit is that most companies, and when I mean most, I'm going to say every single company on planet Earth except us and Paizo, because we're the only people who do this, is that I'll show you what I mean. Is that they have their books. Let's see, Freely doesn't do this. Freely, you see, they have their copy all over the place. Sometimes it goes like, they have just art down here. It doesn't go to the bottom of the page. They just have different size layouts. It's all over the place.
By the way, I like the different size layouts somewhat, and I know that it's a magazine-based thing that Paizo does to always go to the bottom of the page. But
so what Paizo does is that they have every piece of text on every single page fills up every single page. There's only one other company who does that. Who's that? Roll for Combat, because my background is newspapers and magazines, baby, and I like it. And it is way harder to do.
It's not only that, but it also, I think,
harder.
causes people to not realize how much content they get from Paizo and Roll for Combat compared to like a random book that they see from like another 5e Kickstarter that uses the other model and has maybe like a significantly smaller number of words
like
per page.
It in. It is packed.
And they'll just be like, well, this book was X number of pages long, but the number of words on a page matters a lot too.
So because of that, because our books have to fit exactly, we have to do what's called copy fit. And copy fit is that I will go through and I will then put a little X's and I will point to them and say, Mark, I need 1 line on this page. I need 2 lines on this page. Sometimes I will need a sidebar. Like we'll literally say, okay, I need 12 lines. I will make a sidebar and I'll just I'll say, write a sidebar, Mark, just write something. And he goes in and just, basically it fills up the holes. And we fill up the holes usually with text. Very, very rarely I will fill it with art. It's
pretty easy to tell if you need art to fill it up. That is what's going to happen if you were way over on words and there is not a lot of art. And so you wind up having situations where there are whole spreads, especially if 2 in a row, with no art at all on the spread. That's when you know that you want to fill up some of it with a piece of art.
And by the way, when you take a look at books, take a look at them a little bit more carefully. One thing I would say is, take a look to see how much pieces of art they really have. You'd be surprised how much art they really have. A lot of books, not throwing anyone under the bus. I got a 100-page book, and I think there was 7 pieces of art in it. It's like, I was like, but it didn't feel like it because they did some tricks. They do a lot of font changes and a lot of colors, and they had a border. But I was like, wow. And the only reason I knew that is because I downloaded it from DriveThru, and it had the PDF, and then it had an art folder. And the art folder had all the art. And it was only 7 pieces. I was like, that's it? And I'm like flipping through. I'm like, wow, they really only have 7 pieces. If as much art as we have, Paizo still beats me. We have a lot of art. Paizo still goes overboard. I'm like, I have 100, 200 pieces per book. We have pretty much art per page, 1 piece. They have even more. Like I try to make mine as good as theirs, but even they go above and beyond. Like sometimes I look at their books, I'm like, damn, that is too much art. I mean, look at this. Did they really need to put that? Look at that. It's a hoof with some stars on it in the middle of the page. I would never have done that, but they did. Why? I don't know. They just did it.
It's a spot art.
I know, but it's so silly. Cool. It's so silly.
It says the person who has arts of parrots cavorting on the cover.
Though. Their art is so good.
Cool.
The funny thing is, almost all the Paizo artists work for me too. So I look at them and I just like, oh yeah, there's something from. I know exactly who does each one. But anyhow, God, they have so much art in their books. So,
okay, we've done the copy fit, we've done the 5e pass, and we've gotten the proofreading in. And we did a little bit of proofreading afterwards in case the copy fit or the layout caused issues.
So what we do is, I'll tell you another secret, is that I print out the pages and 2 things. And this is rare. No one else really does this. Maybe they do. Is that we will give it to our our proofreaders, and then I'll give it to the Foundry team. And
okay, so A, there are some people that do it, but B, I was going to talk about the Foundry team next because it's the next step. It's not an important part of the copy fit. It is, in fact, a crucial part of the entire.
Yeah.
And it's not just a part of like figuring out the editing. This is exactly where I was going with this. So it's done.
Got it.
That means we can send it to the next step in the process. And once again, at Roll for Combat, we send it to multiple people at once. We will, and this is, I think, a very smart play, send it to the Foundry and Path Builder team, because when they're implementing it on a computer program, they will find the errors.
They find errors. They find errors better than anyone else.
Because they have to code it in. And if it doesn't work, they can't code it in.
Yep.
And if they don't understand it, and there's 2 ways to code it in because of an ambiguity, they'll find that ambiguity. So it's excellent. We do that at the same time that Steven starts sending the information to the printers. And because we do it then, and because we also, another person that we're going to send the PDF to is our backers. The people who bought the product in general will also get it about the same time, except for monthly products where there's a monthly schedule like Year of Legends. And because you get the PDF right away, and not at the same time as the print product, that also means anyone who bought the product can tell us if there are any small things that they find, because Foundry are going to find a lot. Pathfinder is going to find a lot. Not as many as when literally everybody reads it.
Yeah.
And so
it's actually, Delusion King, you're right. Coding the Foundry modules, basically unit testing the rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
They always find they're the best of all the steps we do. They will find the most inconsistencies, not necessarily errors, but they'll find an inconsistency, like you forgot this or you
Yes.
mislabeled that. That's where they find all the time.
Exactly. It's awesome. And so they're working on it. They're helping to fix it. Fans have seen the PDF. They're helping to fix it. And the printers are getting started, but they haven't like locked it in. So there's still time to change things before you have to pay like whatever, $80 to $100 per page that has changes on it, which once it gets locked in, I think it's like somewhere around there. I don't know exactly the details that Steven has with his printer or that any particular company does. That's just what I've generally heard in the industry.
I'll tell you how I do it. I can tell you the printing process because I saw a lot of people ask. So
yeah, go for it. They asked how to find a printer and then how to do the printing process. So we're at that stage.
Okay,
Let's do it.
I'm going to tell you. There's really only two printers out there that you can that are really being used in the industry. There's Regent, and Regent is what DCC Goodman Games uses. That's what Paizo uses. That's what a lot of people uses. And Asia Pacific. There's a couple others. I use Asia Pacific. I've actually used both, but right now we use Asia Pacific. The main reason we use Asia Pacific is because they're really good. they're everyone's good, but their pricing is excellent. They're very easy to work with, and what they do is that the first thing I do is, in the old days, I used to have to just output you what's called gather, and you will gather your InDesign file, and it literally packs it together and send it to them. I don't need to do that anymore. I actually have printed out as a very high quality PDF. It could take literally my computer half an hour to print out a book because it's like, it could be like a 6 gig PDF because it's at 300 plus DPI every page with printer marks on it. They'll give you, the printer will give you the specifications of how to export your PDFs. I literally just send them the PDF and go, okay, here's the book. Here's the Pathfinder book. Here's the 5e book. Have fun. That's the inside of the book. I send them the cover. The cover is a separate file, and the cover has a special layout. What will happen is that I will say to them, okay, the book is 220 pages. And they say, fine, here's the cover. They will literally, because the cover will change based on the number of pages, so the spine will change. So they will give me the template. It's the same template. The only difference is the spine. Sometimes it's 17 millimeters, sometimes it's 20 millimeters, sometimes it's 15.5 millimeters. It's totally based on the number of pages and the stock that you're using. And then the other thing I send, which are called the end pages, and the end pages are the pages that when you first open up the book, this is what you see. And this is an end page for, let's see, here's the end page for, this is Howl of the Wild. So that's an end page. So these are end pages. So the things I send are the inside pages, I send the end pages, and I send the cover. Those are, I don't have to send them, I usually send them the inside pages first because it takes the longest. This is very easy to do. This is like nothing. I never mess this up. The cover sometimes is messed up because it has to be perfect. So that might take a time or two, but also the cover doesn't take very long. It takes an hour to do a layout of cover, if that. So it's very quick. What will happen is that they will then go through the files, and it can take them a week or two to go through it. They go through every single page and they find every single mistake. The things they'll often find is if something is not CMYK. That's rare, but because I usually find those, but every so often it does slip through. If something's not 300 DPI, that actually happens a fair amount. Like sometimes I'll make something and it's 298 DPI, and they'll write back and say, these 5 images are under 300 DPI. Do you want to keep them? They'll print them however you want, but they will say, do you want to keep them or do you want to upscale them? I'll usually upscale them. Say it's fine, don't worry, I'll upscale it. They will also print out, like if something looks weird on the page, like if text is off the page or if it's in the border, they'll do that. They'll basically go page by page and point out every mistake they find. If there's a lot of mistakes, I reprint out the entire book. If there's not a lot of mistakes, I will just print out those pages and send them to them. And then what they do, what's called a low quality proof, where they will send back the pages of the entire book as a low quality PDF and ask you to approve it. That can take a month. Okay, that can get that. It sounds like, oh, you just know, because while this is happening, everything Mark just described happening. So I'm constantly sending them updated pages. It's like, oh, that's a mistake. That's a mistake. That's a mistake. I will keep sending them pages and say, sorry, you got to replace these 5 pages. Sorry, you got to replace these 10 pages. Sorry, you got to replace these 2 pages. Like, I just keep going back and forth, and they'll just
We'll get them from all those venues, and
Yeah.
I'm filtering all of the changes. I'm talking to people who need clarifications with Foundry, with Path Builder, with fans, and I'm sending them to Steven. He's getting them changed. At a certain point, they will send like I think it's called like the proof or something like that.
Right. So eventually,
And then it starts costing to change the pages.
So there's 2 things. So what they will do is they will send, at this stage, once you finally have it approved and you have all the pages done, they will do what's it's kind of a dry proof, where they just print out the pages and they just print it on paper, and it's not high quality. It's literally just a printer. And they'll also send what's called wet proofs. So a wet proof is an actual proof of what it'll look like when it's printed on the actual paper. And you can buy wet proofs at 8 pages at a time. So I will usually buy, in the old days, I would buy like half the book as a wet proof. I don't do that anymore. Now I'll do 8 pages. And I'll just take pages that have a lot of color on them, or pages that I think might have issues, and I want to make sure they look good. This actually happened with Eldamon, because the page with the charts came out really small, the original one. I was like, ooh, these numbers are way too tiny. So I redid that page. At this point, you can make changes, and wet proofs can cost anywhere from $100 to $200 per proof. So a cover can be $200. The end pages could be $200. 8 pages could be $150. So wet proofs aren't free. They'll ship them to you. You get them. You approve it. And once it's approved, you sign off. That's it. Then they print it. Okay. And that's it. So then it's printed. Once it's
approved, it's too late.
It's too late. So then they send me this. So this is basic. I've got the official term, but this is the bind proof. Like, this is the book. This is literally the book. Okay, this is the cover. This is what it looks like before it's mounted. This is the book unassembled. This is exactly what it's going to look like. This is the colors and everything. And they sent this to me because this is your last chance to make changes. And if you need to make a change, and if you're like, ugh, I messed up something, they have to reprint the entire signature, and it can easily cost $1,000. Because you have to reprint 16 pages at a time. You can't reprint 1. So they'll do it for you, but it'll also delay it. Once that's approved, they do what's called binding. And then they bind the book, they make the books, and then they will send you about 6 of the books, FedEx. They send me 6 books. I'll have the books so I can see what it looks like. And by the way, I will have the Eldamon book in 2 weeks. I'll actually have the actual hardcover. I'll bring it to Origins, by the way. Maybe I'll give Mark a copy. We'll see if he's good.
I'd like one.
I know you will. I'm only going to have 6, and I need to give some to Diamond. I have to give them a couple, so I might not have any to spare, by the way. So I'll see what I can do, because I won't have that many. But then I'll have all of them. So they FedEx me 6. That's standard. After that, it costs a lot if you want to get there. They're literally 6 books can cost you $800. So I only get 6 because after that it gets very expensive. So I don't do that. And then they put the rest of the books on a boat that goes to your warehouse, and that usually shows up in about 6 to 8 weeks. And then it gets sent to you, and there you go. And by the way, that whole printing process can take 4 to 6 months. So it takes a while. I mean, it sounds like, because it's actually fast, but it's just every step takes a long time. And so, I go, that's going fast. Like 4 months sounds like a long time, but Keep in mind, they're printing up hundreds of other things besides yours. So they can't just drop whatever they're doing and just print yours and bind it and send it out. They got to coordinate with the million other things they're doing. So you got to keep that in mind. And one thing about China, I'm not knocking it, but like I tried to do something in America recently and they were like, oh, we don't have space on our press until like 9 months from now. So I was like, well, that's great. I'm not going to wait a year to get my book. Like in China, they will find space within weeks. It's very rare that I have to wait more than 2 or 3 weeks for them to have space in their printing schedule. So that's about it. Mark, you can go.
There we go. So
printing.
We've talked about printing. A lot of people wanted to know about it. That's some in-depth info about printing. So we've sent it to the printer. We've gotten back those proofs.
That's when you got to pay. Wait, that's when you got to pay for the printing too. So
yes.
All up to this point, you thought, oh, we made the money. Well, now you got to pay for the printing, baby. And the printing is easily $25,000 plus. So, well, for ours they are because we print a lot of books, and we print 2 copies. But we'll say 10,000 minimum. Okay, that's minimum. And you're not paying for that until now. So all that other stuff, you just paid for the freelancers, you just paid for the art, you just paid for the layout, you paid for all that, and now you got to pay for the printing. And the shipping. You got to pay for the shipping too. And we didn't even get to warehousing because that's the next thing you got to do. Got to pay for that.
Everything costs money.
Yes.
That's something that I've been glossing over, but at every stage of this time, at every step of the process, it's going to continue to cost money. And these are times that if you haven't done this before, you might not remember all of the steps of the process with your budgeting. Things will fall through. You'll need extra art. You'll need extra writing. You'll need extra development. You'll need something else. And so always make sure you have a cushion, or be willing to say that you have money in your savings that you're willing to take out of your own money to bolster this project. And it is a serious problem when you're doing something in tabletop RPG design, especially if it's a big project. So at this point, we've got the book, it's being printed, we've got our Foundry module, we've got our Path Builder. So we're going to send those out to people once those are available, and the books to the public. And at this stage of the game, we're still collecting potential errata for another printing. Now, unlike in a Paizo book, because people were giving errata from the already released PDF and so many other people had a say before the first printing, there's usually not as many errata. And I really like that because I like having the first printing of a book and be like, this is the first one, but I also want it to be as correct as possible. And that only happens because we put out the PDF in advance and don't wait to put that out at the same time as the print product. Otherwise, we couldn't do it. So those are all like making the book. Now the book is in your hands. But there's a lot of other things we have to do in the company that are not just that are also very important. For example, funding it. We talked a lot about, well, you need to have money. Well, how do you get that money? In our case, we fund it via Kickstarter, and you might be able to fund via crowdfunding too. However, if it's your first project, you might not. You might need to do something a little bit smaller because if you have not already done something, it might be hard to convince people to back your project in the quantity that you would need without having a huge amount of money behind you. This is because without having like an authority to be like, well, I did this and that, or a lot of money to pre-buy tons of good art and advertising, you're going to have issues getting a hook that draws people to your project on the crowdfunding site. That could be why doing a few smaller projects first and getting your name out there could help you build momentum for a crowdfunding project.
Yeah, so this is the thing, is that it's very expensive. I mean, after it's all said and done, it's like when you see these Kickstarters and you're like, oh, they made $200,000. I'm like, yeah, well,
they might have lost money.
They probably,
yeah,
you can lose money on that very easily because, it's basically, I always say that it's like a book, just to do one book, it's like $50K. I mean, it's just that's what it is. And some of these
It
books,
depends on the length of the book.
well,
It could
I'm
be
talking
more
about
than that if it's a
I
giant
was
book.
about to say, I'm not even getting. I was like,
Yeah.
I always say that when you see these Pathfinder books, this book, this how the this probably cost $100,000 to make this book. Okay, and it's just, and I'm including printing, but the amount of art, the art alone is like probably $25,000 just for the art. And people are like, "What?" And I'm like, "Why are these books so expensive?" That's why, man. It's like you
The
get what you
art
pay
usually
for.
costs significantly more than the words.
Yeah.
Significantly more.
Oh, yeah. It's not even close. Well, it depends on how much art, and then
Yes.
you have to keep in mind you got people who have to work on this book for how many months, and
Yep.
they have to pay their
And you have
salaries.
to pay their salary.
Right.
You have to count that. And with Paizo, there's a lot of steps of the process. There's a lot of people who make the books as awesome as they are. And so that's a decent number of salaries. Now, many of them, this isn't the only book they're working on. But if you divide out all the books they were working on by the number of months that they were working, it'll add up. That Steven's exactly right. Like, these books are expensive to make. And so, yeah, a Kickstarter that makes $200,000, if they're not careful, they could easily lose a lot of money on that
Mhm.
because you can quickly spend that on art, on text, on printing, on advertising, and other places, and find that you overpromised, especially if you get overeager on stretch goals and they're expensive to manufacture and they cost a lot of your time and energy to design. You can wind up realizing that the more you sold, actually, the more you were losing. And this is part of the reason why during the OGL crisis, everybody who crowdfunded beat the drums and said, like, look, this, because if you recall back during the OGL crisis, wotc had been saying at the time that when you make past a certain amount of money on your product, you have to pay wotc, it was like 20% or 25 something, or it was 25%, but Kickstarter got a special deal saying it was 20. That was how Kickstarter kind of confirmed it when it was being a rumor by being like, no, we got you a good deal. It's down to be lower of your gross earnings. And by gross, I mean not net. I mean like the amount you earned before paying your expenses past a certain amount of money. And if you already might be losing money on a Kickstarter and you paid 20%, like that was their proposal at the time, which thankfully they have removed since then, that would almost definitely mean that you would lose money the minute you cross that point. You would just be losing money for every sale.
It would basically they all would go out of business. It basically would put them out of business. This happened, and this happened with what was the video game engine? The exact same thing happened with the video game engine, where they started to ask for a percentage of sales, and people were doing the math.
Was it Unity or was it somebody else?
Engine, and people did the math and said after a while you're literally paying them on every sale, and that's exactly what happened. It's like, look, I hate to break it to you, you can't take, if you take any of our money, then we will basically stop supporting you, or we'll do our own system, because we can't give you 5%, let alone 20%. And don't forget, Kickstarter, they take like 10%, so like they don't take 10%, they take 5%. Stripe takes like another 3%. BackerKit takes another like 2 or 3%. But so everything. Also,
you'll have ones that the charges didn't go through, or returns or other things like that. So I've heard that the rule of thumb is that you should only really expect to see like 80% at best of the amount that popped up at the end of your crowdfund. I don't know if that's actually true or not, because Steven is the one who is the money guy, but that's sort of a rule of thumb that I've heard.
Oh, by the way,
after you pay everybody.
The OGL 2.0, I mean, you and I haven't covered this in a while. I believe it was after 50,000 you had to start paying the money. And I'm like, 50,000, that's nothing. Okay, that's what it costs to make the book.
I think after 50,000 you had to report everything to them in a very detailed amount, and it was like maybe after 200K you pay them 20% of all the rest of what you make.
But the point is like it just would have put everyone out of it. It would have just put us all in bad business. But
anyone who was big enough would have gone out from that, because they would not be able to pay 20% of their gross after a certain point.
Impossible. And so anyhow, basically, this is it. Just knock out basically 15%. So if you have a Kickstarter and it makes $225,000, they take home.
Like Secret Dragons, for example,
Yes.
then you could say that you might have to pay up to, like, it made 223. You might have to pay up to 45 of that back to Kickstarter, BackerKit, Stripe,
so maybe
people whose funding doesn't go through, and etc. after the project is over.
The best part is that you got to pay taxes on that. So
Correct.
if you get a check for $200,000 from Kickstarter, well, and then the end of the year ends and you have $100,000 left, you don't have to pay tax on $200,000. You have to pay tax on whatever's left. So
yes, the good news is that means let's say you had 225 and it went down to 180 after cancellations and Kickstarter and people taking their fee, and then you paid your artists, you paid your authors, you paid your other people, and you paid the printer, and you paid them 150. If you do your business taxes right, you do not have to pay taxes on the 150 that you paid, because those are expenses. You pay taxes on the last 30,000 that you had left over, or something, or something like that.
And that's why MDM or MCDM, they did something tricky, which I can't believe.
Very smart
and very tricky and very risky. Is they did their Kickstarter in December, which no one does, by the way. No one does that. And they got paid in January. So they got like 4 million. So they have all year to spend that 4 million, because whatever they have left by the end of this year, they're going to have to pay tax on. So if they have 3 million left, they're going to have to pay tax on $3 million. So the good news is they also have to pay estimated tax throughout the year. I won't get into that, but they're technically supposed to be paying taxes all year, and you will be hit with penalties if you don't. So for example, if they get paid 4 million and they estimate by the end of the year they're going to have $1 million left, they have to pay throughout the year estimated taxes of 1 million, of what they would be taxed on 1 million per quarter. So they have to basically pay estimated taxes on $250,000 per quarter. And
so someone pointed out in chat, and they were right. It wasn't that the proposed 20% to 25% was not per project. That it was over the year. Sold
that's even worse.
It was 700.
That's
something,
even worse.
Then you pay all the rest of your gross.
Oh, yeah, that's terrible. Anyhow,
it was not good. But
Tiger Eyes.
There's also some super chats I think that we saw throughout the time. Tiger Eyes sent a great topic and video. Thanks, guys. And what does basic art cost per area? Black and white versus color. Full page, half page, full body, no backgrounds.
I can't even tell
Steven, you already said that it varies. That you may pay 100 to 150 for full body, no background, maybe more depending what's in it.
It depends what's in it. It's like 100 to 150 full body. Half a page, I've seen it anywhere from 250 to 500. And then full for half a page. And for full page, it can be anywhere from 500 to 1,000 for color. Covers are more expensive because there's even more detail. I don't do black and white, so I don't know, but black and white's really inexpensive. I know black and white could be like a quarter of that. It's very inexpensive in comparison. You can do. I've gotten full page black and whites for $100 as opposed to 1,000. I don't know, because again, I don't do black and white, so I don't know that as well. But that's basically it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Val had a question wondering why not December? Because of the holidays and people saving up?
Because everyone's out of money in December. And also there's so many other things going on. People are spending.
They're spending on gifts for the holidays. They're spending on holiday vacations if they had money to spend on it. Whereas oftentimes people like to run them after people got their tax rebates back, because then people are looking for something cool to get after they have their tax rebates back.
Yeah, actually, supposedly the best month to run a Kickstarter is March and April, because people have money and then they spend it. Supposedly, it's kind of going over the place because everyone will tell you a different time and month, because it's. But generally, it is considered the worst time to do it is December, which was shocking that they did theirs in December, and it was so successful. I was like, "Wow, no one!"
It was great now for them because you only have to pay at the end of the.
No, not really.
You only have to pay at the end of the year.
But they have to do estimated.
As long as they get their expenses in, so they have more time to get their expenses in on the project.
Yeah. Well, though, if the government looks at them carefully, then if they weren't paying estimated throughout the year, they will get hit with penalties.
Oh, sure. I mean, you have to pay estimated, but you can estimate based on what you think the expenses are going to be.
So, long story short is,
Yeah.
unless you are really lean and mean and have me and Mark do it, like a small group, it's very hard to make money on this or do it successfully. But you can, because people are saying, oh my God, you must do this for the love. I do, but if you're smart and you know what you're doing and you're estimating and you have it keep going and you keep doing, if you do enough Kickstarters and get enough,
you can build up a portfolio and get momentum. Like in the example we gave there, where you're like, oh my gosh, and I paid 150 and I've only got 30,000 left, even though we did this huge giant project. That is not counting any sales that product makes later on, which it will probably. The rule of thumb, which is not really perfect, but people just like to guess that however many you sold in the crowdfunding, you'll sell over the course of the lifetime of the product about that much more. But if you get big, it might be more than that. For certain products, like I know our dragon book kept selling out, so I'm assuming that it got big and it has become larger than those expectations. But the expectation is that at least you'll get that. That'll bring in more. As you start building up momentum on your project, you might find that you can add some of your older products as add-ons to later Kickstarters, or get them in there, and people will be like, hey, I really like what you're doing, and they go back to your back catalog. And so over time, if you commit to it, and it requires a big commitment, you need to be able to afford to get into this thing, and you need starting capital for that kind of, or the ability to make lots of small projects that you know are not going to make money or lose you money, or you're not going to get it. But by the time you do that, you will be able to potentially get to the point where this is sustaining you.
Yeah, it's really hard. Oh,
it's really hard, and it very rarely happens. You will probably make something you love, make something other people love, make people happy, but lose money or not make enough money to pay for your time.
So then they have, on the marketing and distribution. It's another whole thing. I didn't even get into that. I won't even do marketing is like a whole other topic, but distribution. So to distribute a product, there's a lot of companies out there that will do Kickstarter distribution, and you'll send your product to their warehouses. They'll warehouse it for you. You have to give the instructions to the warehouse, to the printer of how to, they have to make the boxes a certain way with certain information on it so that they can store it and find it and organize it. Then you keep it in the warehouse, and then when you distribute it, they have these systems that tie directly into BackerKit or Kickstarter so that they can then find the orders and ship them directly to the correct people. It's all integrated. It's called ShipStation. It's the most popular one that they use. ShipStation is software, and then they are able to figure out how to send it, how to track it, how to box it. That's another thing, because it costs. You have the shipping costs, then you have the boxing costs. If you have a lot of pieces, they're called picks. It gets very expensive if you go past 3 picks. So if you have 5 items in your box, it costs more than 3. If you have 10 items, it can literally cost you, if you have a lot of items in your box, it can cost you just $10 and $5 to $10 just in picks, which is them just putting the box together. Now multiply.
And what is in the box will matter, because if it has the correct kind of things, it can be classified as media mail, and you really in the U.S. want it to be classified as that.
Believe it or not, I found that media mail is actually only for educational materials. But
wait, really?
Yeah,
I thought that like tabletop RPGs can count as that.
Guess what? Guess what counts as educational materials? TTRPGs, baby. That's right.
Yep. Because they are educational, like legitimately.
It's educational materials.
I promise you that I would not have gotten into MIT if it weren't for tabletop RPGs. They taught me probability. They taught me like weird words and like language and math, like all the kinds of things people test. And I, for sure, at the very least, when I was like in high school, I won like a county math competition on like a tie break. And at least one of those questions was the probability question I only knew because of tabletop RPGs, like for sure. So like tabletop RPGs are educational. Don't let anybody say that they're not.
So And then you finally get it out there, and then you got to deal with all the problems. If people get the wrong books, if people have mistakes, if there's damages, if they don't get their products, and then you got to deal with that. So
Yep.
it never ends. It just never, ever, ever ends.
You've got to always focus on that, though. It's important. Make sure that you do your best and are customer facing, because that's part of how you'll go from that first project where, as we gave the example, even if it makes hundreds of thousands, you may make almost nothing or lose a little money, but you'll become someone who can get bigger and consistent and do more projects and eventually start doing well if you get a reputation for delivering quality, for being good to deal with, and being able to handle issues. And people become more of a community and not just like something super transactional. And that can help.
So, by the way, what we just described, that was one book.
Yeah, that was one book, and we'll usually be doing multiple books at the same time. We have to juggle.
You're talking. I think we put out 20 books this year, so that's why I said don't do what we do, because what I just described was one book. Now imagine doing that 40 times a year.
And the process of the thing where Steven was saying don't do it like us is like it'll be like 2 a.m. and Steven will be like, oh my gosh, I need this thing right away. And I'll be like, can it wait till tomorrow? And he's just like, yeah, I'm just up now at 2 a.m. But sometimes like, no, if I could, but I'm gonna spend another 2 hours tonight and I'm blocked by it. And I'll be like, oh fine, this will only take 5 minutes. Fine, I'll do it at 2 a.m. this time.
Yeah.
And then it's just very chaotic and back and forth. I am someone who is able to easily pivot on a dime to do whatever thing Steven sent to me, but I have worked with a lot of different people, and over half of people would get randomized for 15 to 30 minutes of just like dead time every time Steven sent them a thing like that. That doesn't happen to me. I work great. I do it and I'll go back. In fact, sometimes it can be refreshing to give myself a change of pace. But a lot of people I've worked with in tabletop RPGs, it's not all like people have different personalities and work styles. It would just be like the moment, even if they didn't do the side task, the moment they were asked to do it and start thinking about how they would do it and where they would schedule it, that's a half an hour gone from their workday.
Yeah.
As someone who was managing at tabletop RPGs, I had to learn carefully who was what and keep that in mind when juggling and doing things. With us, we do it very fast and loose because we're only 2 people and we're 2 people who can make that work. It makes us extremely agile, the fact that we do that successfully, but I do not recommend it for you. For you, if you've got multiple people in your process, I think you should have a more structured approach because you probably have at least one person who cannot handle this approach or who maybe thinks they can, but it'll wind up getting kind of sloppy and things will get dropped along the side. Because ideally, you need to have one person who actually is very detail oriented and keeps their own notes of where everything is, even if the process is a little more chaotic, so that they can refer back to that as a backbone while still being able to handle the dynamism. And they have to be able to play both sides of that if you want it to work. We have that, but chances are that someone on your team would do better if you did not listen to that. That's why Steven started by saying, don't follow that process advice.
Well, the other issue is just because, so in my day job is I mostly do Fortune 500, specifically pharmaceutical websites. It's very similar. Someone said, yeah, it's similar process to software to startup. It's very similar. It's very similar to software development. It's very similar to startup process. And if you can work in that environment, the closest analogy is air traffic controller. Air traffic controller is, what do they say? It's like 95% or 98%, total peace and quiet and 2% absolute terror. And that's basically my job. It's, when I've been around where a site goes down and it has to come back up within the hour, and it's like, no, it doesn't might come up, you must bring it up, and there is no maybe. It has to be. You do that for long enough and you get pretty thick skin, and it takes a lot to really rattle me at this point. So Mark and I are very fast at pivoting. Everyone I work with is very fast at pivoting. All my programmers and everyone in my companies, people I've been working with for 20 plus years, most of them, they work like this. They're used to it. They are. It's interesting but one of my main coders, this guy I've been working with forever, uh, he's been working with me, and he would sometimes complain. He was like, "Oh my God, Steve," because we were going back and forth and like jumping on one project to another and another and another. Like we're always all over the place, and we're just jumping constantly and fixing things, and it's just madness. And then he just got a more stable job, and he's working for like Estee Lauder. And he's like, "Oh my God, I am so bored." I'm like, "Really?" He goes, "Everything is so slow. It's so organized. I'm dying here." I was like, "Ah, I used to complain when things were crazy." He's like, "I know. I didn't realize how much I liked it until I wasn't in it." It's a weird catch-22. It's like you hate it, but you can't live without it. So, and I knew when I met Mark, I knew he could handle it. So I knew Mark can handle this type of workflow. The people I work with, they can handle it. A lot of the coders can handle it. A lot of software developers can handle it. It's just, I think it's more common now. And I'd say 20, 30 years ago, this was much rarer. Also, there's so many distractions in the world now today, and kids are just so used to, or a younger generation is so used to like multitasking, true multitasking of, juggling 1,000 things at once. But not everyone can, and it is extremely chaotic. Every single day, I probably do 100 different things that have nothing to do with one another. It's like it's very rare that I will sit down and just do one thing or even 5 things in a day. It's
So
just
connected to what Stephen is
happen.
saying about the different people, we talked about hiring artists and authors as freelancers where they're on commission for one project. But this, what Stephen was saying, speaks to the possibility that maybe you have someone who's a collaborator with you. Maybe they are a co-owner and are having a share. Maybe they're an hourly employee or salaried employee or something like that. The calculus changes on what you want to do depending on that situation. If you have someone who is a salaried or hourly employee who you're expecting to get things done, then the move that a lot of people have learned in the tech world is that there's something called like the 10 times developer in the tech world, where the idea is at your company, a sufficiently large company, the person who is the most productive at the company is likely 10 times as productive as the one who is the least. Not because the person who is most productive is a god or because the person who is the least is doing nothing, but that when you compare the two of them, I think it may have been more anecdotal than actually put into like a serious peer-reviewed study to find this out. At the very least, you're going to get some multiplier though. And when you're in an industry like tabletop RPGs where everything is razor thin and very dangerous, you might be tempted to skimp on how much you're paying, and then just hire more people for the lowest rate. I don't recommend it. I recommend find someone who is super productive and just gets tons of things done, and then pay them so well that they definitely want to work for you and they're enthusiastic to do that, instead of going at the lowest rate you can find and then possibly hiring more people who will accept it at that rate, which you might be tempted to do when you're on a
you got to
budget.
manage them.
You've got to manage them, and you're building up. The amount of management that you need is almost quadratic in the number of people. Because if you have only 2 people, there's one connection. There's the Mark Steven connection. That's a pipeline. If you have 4 people, though, then there's I think up to 6 different connections that you need to do. There's person A to person B, person A to person C, person A to person D, person B to C, B to D, and C to D.
Yeah, you're right.
It suddenly goes up to 6, even though we've only doubled the number of people. We've multiplied by 6 the number of connections.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not going to think about that, but that is true. And second of all, it can just even literally be more cost effective, not even counting management. And then when you have enough people, you have to also hire a manager as well, because you're not going to be able to manage everything, and it just starts ballooning out from there. Mm-hmm. So when you have a big budget, you know what, you can make it work either way. But when you're small and you're on the line and you're like, no, I don't know if I can justify paying more, to make sure I get this person who does a lot is always worth it to do that.
The Mythical
Not
Man
just in
Month.
tabletop.
The Mythical, that is, I had to read that book in college my freshman year. That's a very good book, The Mythical Man Month. So we've been going on a long time. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of this. There was a lot. There's even more, but that's the basics. And I thought people would be interested. I'll leave this with one other thing, is that as much as this sounds like, I leave Mark alone 98% of the time. That's something else, is that Mark and I now don't talk every single day. Mark knows what he needs to do. He has a plan. And, I do usually talk to him once a day. We'll just touch base, or we'll go talk about things specifically to a specific project. But if he's just working on an ancestry, I just let him do it. And that's the other thing.
I would say that there's a chance on any given day, including the weekends, that I will have 0 pings from Steven. And there's and there's a chance I will have like 75 pings and any number in between that. And when I have 0, then I get lots done on my main task. And when there's a lot of things, I do lots of small tasks for Steven, because those are usually when like 8 different projects are all hitting multiple points at the same time. And
that's something
so
else.
he needs
I know if I bug him that he's going to not be able to do what he's working on. But also, what I'll often try to do, like I did today, is that I gave him a list of things I wanted done before he even got to work. So that way he can do those and then he'll be done. And then he doesn't have to work on that for the rest of the day.
That tends to make it easier. One other thing that's a good thing about having 2 people, I'll say it's a good thing about working with Steven, because in a larger company you don't get this, is because Steven is literally the only other person who's like full-time here with me. When Steven gives me a list of 5 things and I say, okay, no problem, I'm going to delay the thing I'm currently working on and do those 5 things, and I'll get back to the thing I'm working on. He's like, well, of course, I just gave you 5 things.
Yeah.
But if you're at a big company and person X gives you 1 of the 5 things, and person Y gives you 2 of the 5 things, and person Z gives you 2 more, and the main big thing you're doing is actually for a 4th person, then the 4th person, you might try to tell them, well, X, Y, and Z gave me 5 things, and they might be like, well, tough. I want you to work on the main thing you're working on, or they might just not be willing to give you more time on the main thing. And it starts getting into an issue where with Steven, he's like, well, of course you will take more time on the main thing. I just gave you 5 things. Do those 5 things, and then you can do the next thing. So it's much easier when there's basically one group of people who know what all the projects are, who know what all the tasks are, and who understand the pipelining process, such that especially if you're going to be this chaotic and shift things around, so they know, oh, I've shifted it, so of course that means other things shift too. At a bigger company, you will not get that kind of understanding.
I got 9 bosses. So he says in Office Space. But I'll leave you with this, is that we are doing our next Kickstarter pretty soon, which will be Battles of Bestiary Elemental Storm, which we're going to start talking about soon.
I'm so excited for Elemental Storm because there's so many cool monsters and things in there.
Look what I got here.
Oh, you're showing off the secret super incentive to everybody?
This will be the super incentive. Well, everyone stayed here for so long. Check this out. This is
Look what's in there. It's not just like a random Kraken.
It's a dice case. Look at that. There's dice in there.
It's got like mini... Are they metal dice?
They're metal dice.
Yeah.
And then you can carry it around with you. Now, how cool are these things? They're so freaking cool. Quality is insane, too. It's heavy. It's like a weapon, this thing. It's a metal weapon. So you'll be able to get that only through our Kickstarter and never any other place. It won't even be available for order. You'll only be able to get it if you sign up early. That's it. That's the only way. If you don't sign up, you won't be able to get it. So make sure you subscribe to the newsletter. Or on the Discord. And we're trying something new. In the past, we've done early bird. This is so early bird that someone said, I would get this, and then you lose on your carpet. I have dropped these dice more than once. I will tell you that. I have dropped these dice. I have found them, because look, they are, I'm going to drop them now. They are tiny, but they roll. And they're really cool. And they work. It is. You could also put other dice in here. It's actually pretty big. You couldn't put full-size dice in here. Like a full-size dice would not fit, as you can see. But like smaller dice could fit into this thing. Or heck, you don't even put dice into it. You can put whatever you want in this thing. But it comes with dice. It comes with a full set. 7 dice, baby. How about cool is that? I even have it in 2 colors. And they have different backs. Oh, look at that. Going crazy. We're crazy here. We're crazy here. Oh, and the Mimic box. Oh, yeah. By the way, here's the Mimic box. Hello. How you doing? Hello. I think it came out so good. They're making it. If you're, it's probably spent. I've been getting updates. These are hand painted, and there's 1,000. Actually, I think 1,100. They're making 1,100 of these things. They hand paint these suckers. Can you believe it? That is a lot of work. So they take it a while, but it's all going to come together. Actually, the Mimic boxes will be done before the book is done. So, yeah. When will the Elemental Storm Kickstarter be coming? This summer. This summer. We're working on it right now. First problem is I had to get all the art done. It's catch-22. It's like, wait a second. I need monsters done. Yeah, this would be the marketing segment. I won't even go through marketing. Marketing is the bane of my existence. It is a fun, but it's exhausting. Like, at least for everything else, when you do something, you get immediate satisfaction. Marketing,
It's a long game.
It's a long game. There's no real satisfaction with marketing. Very rarely, like if you do a sale and you're getting hits, that's fun. That works. But otherwise, 99% of marketing is sending things out there and hoping it's working, and you don't know. The tools are a lot better now, but still it's extremely nebulous, and I've been doing it my whole life, and I don't love it. It's not my favorite part, but as a catch-22, whenever I give it to someone else, they always do a much worse job. Much worse job than I do. So I end up doing it because just that's life, man. Anyhow, back to the Mimic box. Look at this thing, Mark. Aren't you excited to get yours?
I am. The Mimic box is the one that I'm most excited about of all of the incentives that we've had.
And look, it's got the logo on the bottom.
That's cool.
I know.
But yeah, of all the incentives, the little freebie incentives, the Mimic box is my favorite incentive.
This thing is awesome.
I also like some of the things that weren't incentives, obviously, but this was a great incentive.
This thing is freaking amazing, and it's huge. I mean, look how big this thing is. I mean, look, it's like the size of my head. I mean, it's like, okay, not really, but it is big. They're not fooling around with this sucker. It's great. I love this thing. I love it. And I'm going to have 100 of them in my office. People are going to come in and they're like, oh my God, what is going on in Steve's office? Why does he have 100 freaking mimics? Oh, wait, there was one more thing I wanted to show off here that Oh, the other thing. Oh, I don't have it here. The dice kit. People love that dice kit. I probably might do more of those. The little leather dice kit I ordered. Oh, people ordered extra boxes. Oh yeah, this mimic thing. Oof, damn, it came out. It's really good. I mean, I can't believe they hand painted. I mean, I know it's China. That's what they do. I mean, I basically found a resin company, and they make thousands of things, but they actually spoke to the artist. She custom did it. They sent me sculpts, and I went back and forth with them until I got it just right. Like, they forgot the keyhole, for example. So I'm like, like there was no keyhole, and I'm like, oh, there's need to be a key, so they added the key. Actually, this is not what it looks like. This one came out very light, and this is like silvery. The real one, this is much darker wood, and it's more grain, and this comes out looking like metal, rather than this is just kind of a flat silver. And they also added, in the eyes, you see it has kind of a starburst. They added that, and a little bit more of a starburst, a little shine, so it looks really 3D. But it even has a magnet to hold it open, so you can display it on your desk like this. So it's just...
That is cool.
I know. Look at that. I mean, really? Come on, man. This was fun. Of all the things I've done, that might be my favorite. and I've done the plushies, and the plushies were fun too.
I like the plushies, but they weren't a free incentive, so I didn't count them against it. The plushies might be better than this, but this is by far the best free incentive.
Well, the fun thing is, and that's one thing, and I'll leave you with this is that you will learn a lot in this job. I didn't know how to do plushies. Now I know how to do plushies. I didn't know how to build a resin mimic before doing this. Now I do. Now I know how to work with resin and work with companies in China. I'm always telling Mark these things I'm discovering. Like I'm like, he's like, Mark is like my little outlet on this. I'm like, oh, look what I figured out. Oh, we're doing this. I'm like,
Always something cool.
I don't even know how we're doing it. Like, I'm just learning all these new things that I didn't know how to do. To be fair, book printing is so much more complex. This stuff's actually quite easy in comparison. A book is way harder to do than a resin mimic, so I'll keep that in mind. Also, I did something fairly easy. Oh, actually, the resin mimic, I'd say that's a medium level. The easiest thing would have been like just something static. Like if I did something like this would have been easy because that's just statics. Anything with moving parts becomes more complex. But I did find a really good company, and they're great. But it does take a long time. That's the thing. It's like it took them a month just to make the molds. Because think about that, they have to make 2,200 molds
It's a lot of molds.
because the top and the bottom are separate molds. Plus they need
Right.
extras, and then they got to paint every single one, and then they got to assemble them, and then they got to package them, and then they got to send them. It's like I know the books, but the books is mostly automated, not completely, but mostly. But this is all done by hand. I was like, God bless you, man. This stuff is hard. I'm like, I was kind of surprised. I almost feel bad having these mimics made, and it has really made me appreciate some of the things in my office when I look around now. And I'm like, wow, that was all done by hand. It's like I have a lot of bobbleheads because I have a whole shelf with I only have a shelf with about 25 bobbleheads, and I know they're all done by hand, man. Probably in China. They're all done in China. So it really is, makes you appreciate how hard some of these things are. Anyhow, you never forget your first mimic lesson. Uh, that's true. Getting a mimic to mimic a mimic is the easiest way to occupy them. Well, you can play a mimic. Are resin mimics considered educational? No,
I
they
don't
are
think
not.
so.
And they're heavy. So that is why shipping is not included. And we try to do our whole thing. Mark wants me to do a whole thing on shipping, which I will one day because I learned something new yesterday, Mark.
Oh,
Yes, that shipping from the United States to the rest of the country is extremely expensive. Sorry, the rest of the world. But shipping to the United States, especially from China or India, dirt cheap.
well, getting to the United
Yes.
States is cheap, but getting
Dirt.
away is expensive.
Yes. Because I won't get into it, but I was looking at something and it was so cheap. I couldn't believe how cheap it was with shipping. It was like this thing that was thousands of dollars that they were selling for like $700 for shipping. I'm like, how is that possible? And I looked into it, I was talking to people, and they say it's coming from India. And I was like, how is that? And it's like, it's just so cheap, man. It's like the shipping there is ridiculous. And China too. Like, it's so cheap to send things, not air. We're talking like boat or parcel mail.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, and they're slow. Like Linda recently ordered like
So
a
cheap.
Leshy-ish Pokemon from Japan, and the shipping was very cheap, but it was also like 24 days.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Right.
yeah.
It'll take like 3 weeks, but it'll cost like $5, $10.
Yes.
You're like,
Yes,
it's
I
coming
was
from
surprised when I
Japan.
knew how much things were costing sending out to people. And yeah, it's interesting because it certainly
eye-opening.
explains why some people have distribution centers in other places, I guess.
Well,
But
it's
that's its
yeah,
own whole cup of tea.
Yeah, it's eye opening because let me tell you, when we're shipping to these countries, there's no we get it as cheap as possible, and I get massive discounts, and it's still expensive.
It's hecka expensive, and it just keeps going up. That's
And it
why I
just
think the
keeps going
episode
up.
will be interesting because people are seeing in their wallets and their pocketbooks, they're seeing these prices go up on everything that they're buying. They're probably wondering why, how, what is going on. And with the spreadsheets and the numbers
Because there's four
to show
companies.
behind the scenes, it'll be like,
That's it.
this is demystifying, this is why, this is how, and this is what's going on with that.
Yeah, but that's only the United States to other countries. And by the way, you can get, that's a whole other thing. Like if you have, when you said, Mark, by the way, you're right. If you have distribution centers in other countries and ship from those countries, it's way cheaper, but you need to be shipping thousands of products
Yeah.
just to subsidize it. And I don't ship thousands. Like I can't do
We
that.
don't sell enough for
I
that.
don't sell enough. Like if you're not selling, I spoke to
Someday.
people. If they said basically, if you're not selling 1,000 products a year in UK, then it's not worth it. And I don't. I mean, not physical products. I mean, digital, sure, but it's like, and that's just to break even. And
Yeah.
it's extremely expensive to set up. Now, obviously, big companies can do it because they're big companies, but for small ones like us, not really. And 1,000 is really not that much. 1,000, what's 1,000? That's easy. Well, not for us, not for most people, not for most small companies. But the ship here, cheap. God, it's so cheap. That's why everyone comes here. That's why everyone ships here. That's why you can get things from China and India and Pakistan and all around the world, and it costs like nothing to ship here, but everywhere else. Anyhow,
There we go.
hope you learned
everybody,
something.
I hope you learned a lot about running an RPG company and the full process of making a project from start to finish, as well as all the wild number of plates that are being juggled behind the scenes at your favorite tabletop RPG company, and that you will need to juggle if you're thinking of getting into it. So I hope it's educational. I hope it helped you if you're considering this moving forward. Maybe it helped you decide not to do it, which is a form of helping, I guess. You could always put out your idea as like a free, like just post it online somewhere if you don't want to get into this whole monetizing business. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments below after the episode, and we'll see what people think.
Yeah, and if you have any specific, I mean, the problem is people ask very specific questions like, who do you use? How do you do this? And it's not very easy to answer that because there's usually not a very specific answer. We're not trying to be evasive. It's just there is none. Like, it's like, who do you use for printing? I'm like, well, who I use for printing is not who you should probably use because I print at a different scale and different quality. And also, yeah, like, there's a lot of factors. It's not just one size fits all for everything we described. So
before we go, do remember to like and subscribe. And if you like this kind of content, particular, if you like this more informative deep dive content, I can tell you one person who doesn't, and it's not a person, it's a robot. It is the YouTube algorithm is not as much of a fan of this kind of content as it is of like, oh my gosh, have you seen this thing style content? And so we could use your likes and subscribes in order to trick the algorithm into thinking that people like to watch informative content just like we do, or at least I do. And with that, everyone, do you have anything else, Steven?
nope.
Well, in that case, until next time, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat.